Chapter 1907. In the spectator stands of the battle arena, Walnut and her master had followed Lu Ye's message and entered this place. They immediately saw Lu Ye preparing for battle below. When she turned to look at Lu Ye's opponent, Walnut couldn't help but be startled. Why is he challenging the third-ranked person? According to the information she had, Lu Ye was only ranked 7th on the Yu Yao battle roll. Thus, he should be challenging the 6th-ranked person this time. However, for some reason, the gap was so large that he had skipped quite a few people in one go. She checked the information on this third-ranked person and immediately remembered. It's the Sher tribe's Tianyan. She had never seen Tianyan before, but she had heard of his great name. This was because he had the title of Eternal Third in the Yu Yao battle arena. In other words, he had always maintained his third rank in the Yu Yao battle arena. It had been many years, and his rank hadn't risen, nor had it fallen. This was because he had defeated all the cultivators who had challenged him, and he didn't have the ability to defeat the 2 people ranked above him. Thus, he had always maintained his third rank. Master, which side should we place our bet on? Walnut was a little troubled. Although she thought very highly of Lu Ye based on the results of the previous battles, Tianyan wasn't an ordinary Yu Yao. If he didn't have some strength, he wouldn't have been able to maintain his title of Eternal Third. Walnut wasn't sure whether Lu Ye was a match for Tianyan. If she placed the wrong bet, her Azura seal would be reduced to nothingness. She naturally had to be cautious. When the woman heard this, she said, "Since we're going to bet, then let's bet big. We'll bet everything on that Lu Ye." Walnut was worried. "But master." "No buts." The woman cut her off and said earnestly, "Little Walnut, I've taught you for so many years, yet you still don't understand. The most important thing in gambling is the process. Don't think about the results. If you think too much, you won't have the fun of gambling." Walnut cursed in her heart. It's precisely because of this that you often lose everything you have. However, she knew her master's temperament. Since she had decided to place her bet on Lu Ye, this undoubtedly meant that even her master didn't think highly of Lu Ye. Thus, she could enjoy the nervousness and excitement of waiting for the results. Should she place her bet on Tianyan? In this way, no matter who won, one of them would be able to reap some benefits. Just as he was thinking this, his gaze suddenly landed on the battle arena below. Tianyan's expression was a little strange. At this moment, Lu Ye was casually standing in the middle of the sealed battle arena. Looking left and right, she saw Walnut and her disciple and nodded at them. In the distance, Tianyan's state was a little strange. He was currently staring at Lu Ye with his eyes wide open, looking somewhat suspicious, then shocked, then fearful, and finally revealing a strange expression, as if he had stepped in feces when he came out of the door. This was because he recognized Lu Ye as the one who had beaten him up in the previous training scene. For a moment, he did not dare to believe his eyes. Based on his previous speculation, the head of the 9 heavens, Lu Ye, was definitely a shadow left behind by a monstrous genius of a certain era. In the entire Azura realm, only those 2 fellows could surpass him in strength. There was no one else. They had been suppressing him for so many years, so it was impossible for another one to appear out of nowhere. Only now did he realize that one had appeared out of nowhere. Compared to those 2, the pressure this Lu Ye from the 9 heavens gave him did not seem to be any weaker. If that was all, it would be fine. Tianyan's strength was not bad, and this battle arena was protected by the rules that prevented death. Even if he was not a match for his opponent, he would not shrink back. No matter what, he would fight with all his strength and show the might of his stone clan. But this Lu Ye was not only strong, but his methods were also disgusting. The wound he had inflicted on him in the previous training scene had been lingering with a strange power. Even if he was from the Stone Clan, he could not heal it on his own. In the end, he had no choice but to find an elder from his clan to help suppress and remove it. He had been busy for 10 days. If he was injured by him again in battle, wouldn't he have to continue healing? He had been disgusted recently. With great difficulty, he was about to recover from his injuries. He did not want to experience that kind of terrible experience again. Moreover, how precious was Sunshine's time? How could he let his clan's elder keep healing him? This battle could not be fought. 30 breaths of preparation time quickly passed. Only then did Lu Yi turn to look at his opponent. The moment he regained his freedom, he rushed forward. Suddenly he felt a little strange, because this opponent of his seemed a little familiar. Before he could see clearly, his opponent's figure suddenly disappeared. Lu Yi subconsciously thought that his opponent was a ghost cultivator, and used a method to hide his figure. But soon he realized that something was wrong. Because his vision blurred, he had returned to his own cave. Lu Yi was stunned. In the battle arena, the battle that countless cultivators were looking forward to actually ended just as it started. Walnut, whose face was full of nervousness, was stunned for a moment, then hurriedly checked her Azura command. When she saw that the Azura command had suddenly increased by a lot, she could not help but jump up. I won! She had placed her bet on Lu Yi at the last moment, because she could tell that Tianyan's expression wasn't quite right. Gritting her teeth, she steeled her heart and placed her bet on Lu Yi. This time she had earned a lot, because in the entire battle arena, apart from the master and disciple pair, only a few people had placed their bets on Lu Yi. Most of them had placed their bets on the more famous Tianyan. According to the rules of the winner splitting the loser's bets, the profits obtained from this battle were undoubtedly very considerable, especially since she had bet all of her assets. Her ratio far exceeded that of the others. The woman frowned. Although winning the bet made her happy, Tianyan actually retreated without fighting. This inevitably made people feel strange. There was no danger to one's life in the battle arena. If Tianyan had no intention of fighting, he could have completely refused Lu Yi's challenge. This way, the ranking would directly change. Since he had accepted the challenge, why would he take the initiative to admit defeat? Even the woman, who was bright and quick-witted, could not figure out why Tianyan would do this. The entire battle arena boiled over. Countless cultivators loudly cursed shady deals, secret deals, and the like, requesting the Azura field to uphold justice. These cultivators who had placed their bets on Tianyan felt that they had lost too unjustly. Moreover, there had never been such a precedent of retreating without fighting in the battle arena, let alone this kind of thing happening to the third-ranked Tianyan. This made people wonder if Tianyan and that Lu Yi had some kind of secret deal. Both sides cooperated to control the results of the battle, using this to amass wealth. If there really was such a thing, the Azura field would definitely not sit by and do nothing. As long as someone brought it up, the Azura field would deal with it strictly. However, what disappointed people was that no matter how fiercely they shouted, Lu Yi and Tianyan's rankings still remained on the ranking, not erased. In Tianyan's cave, he suddenly appeared and returned. The Sunshine Rock tribe member nodded and said, "You won?" As for Tianyan's victory, he was not at all surprised. In the entire Azura field's Yuyao level, aside from those two, no one could be stronger than Tianyan. This time, he wondered who was so blind to challenge him. Tianyan's expression was blank. He scratched his face and said, "I lost." And the Sunshine Rock tribe member was shocked. How could that be? Moreover, to be able to defeat Tianyan in such a short time, even those two could not do it, right? Based on the time, Tianyan had been defeated in 2 or 3 moves after entering the battle arena. What kind of person had such powerful strength? "Elder, it was that guy who challenged me." Tianyan's expression was gloomy. The Sunshine Rock tribe member said in surprise, "The person who injured you previously? That's him." Tianyan nodded heavily. "I originally thought that he was a shadow left behind by a monster from some era, but I never thought that he was not. He is from this era, so I did not fight him. I admitted defeat and withdrew." The Sunshine Rock tribe member nodded and said, "A wise decision." It was not embarrassing to lose. Cultivators who trained in the battle arena would not be afraid of winning or losing. The key was that the injury caused by the other party's long blade was too disgusting. This was the reason why Tianyan withdrew. How can there be such a person in this world? Tianyan was puzzled. The Sunshine Rock tribe member said, "You are content to stay in a corner, forever only able to see the sky above your head. It is not a bad thing to experience some setbacks on the road of growth. You still have a long way to go in the future. A temporary dispute does not mean anything." "I understand, Elder. Tianyan was not someone who could not accept defeat. He thought for a moment and said, I have never heard of this guy before. He should have just come to the Azura field not long ago. Looking at his momentum, he is probably aiming for the top spot. He will definitely challenge those two. Elder, I want to watch the battle. Can I delay the treatment of my injuries for a while? Of course. The Sunshine Rock Tribe member agreed. Thank you, Elder. In Luya's cave, he checked his ranking and found that he had reached the 3rd place. There were only 2 people in front of him. He focused his attention on the basic information of these 2 people. He found that the person in the top spot was Gu Sheng from the Yellow Dragon realm. Below Gu Sheng was a cultivator from the ancient barbarian realm called Abdullah. Luya's heart skipped a beat. The Yellow Dragon realm was indeed worthy of its reputation. He could hear the name of this realm everywhere he went. On the Wanxiang Sea, there was the Yellow Dragon Island, which was famous for its fighting prowess. The top spot in the battle arena was also a cultivator from the Yellow Dragon realm. It was indeed one of the top realms in the starry sky. It was full of talents. He knew a little about the ancient barbarian realm. It was a very strange realm. Generally speaking, the realms of various sizes in the starry sky would be affected by the changes in the overall environment, and then some changes would occur. Perhaps these changes would be very small and unnoticeable, but over a long period of time, these accumulated changes would be very big. This was also the reason why the current cultivation environment was completely different from that of the ancient barbarian realm. Only the starry sky wonders that were born in ancient times maintained the characteristics of ancient times. The ancient barbarian realm was special in that it had the characteristics of a starry sky wonder. It did not seem to be affected by the changes in the overall environment. The entire realm maintained the appearance and environment of ancient times. End of chapter. Chapter 1908. The special environment of the ancient barbarian world made the cultivators of this world maintain the most ancient cultivation method. And there was only one race in this world, and that was the barbarian race. Lu Yi had never seen a real barbarian race before, but according to what he knew, the barbarian race's appearance was not much different from the human races. But as a whole, their bodies were several times bigger than the human races. Moreover, they were most proficient in the way of tattooing, which was a battle method passed down from ancient times. If not for the barbarian race's difficulty in reproduction and their small population, they would definitely be a famous race in the starry sky. Moreover, their lifespan seemed to be much shorter than the cultivators of other races, which seemed to be caused by the environment of the ancient barbarian world. Even with the barbarian race's cultivation method, there was no way to change this. Now, he was ranked 3rd, and according to the rules, he could only challenge Abdullah, unless Abdullah was not in the heavenly Azura world. Just as he was about to challenge Abdullah, his Azura token moved, and he immediately checked it. He thought it was Walnut, but it turned out to be Yu Yaorao's message. She sounded very surprised. You defeated Tianyan? Lu Yi thought that the news spread really fast. He had just won the battle, and Yu Yaorao already knew about it. Could it be that she happened to be watching the battle in the arena just now? However, after asking, he found out that this was not the case. Yu Yaorao just happened to check the ranking of the Yu Yao battle arena and found that Tianyan's name was pushed down by Lu Ye's, so she asked, Good fight. Yu Yaorao seems to have some prejudice against Tianyan. Previously, during the training, those pirate gangs were gathered by him. Lu Yi suddenly realized why he felt Tianyan was somewhat familiar. He's the chief of Thunder Light Gang? The main reason was that Tianyan ran too fast, so he didn't have time to carefully size him up. Otherwise, he would definitely recognize him. He was wondering why Yu Yao, who was ranked 3rd, retreated without a fight. It turned out that she had already fought with him before. It's him. Yu Yaorao gnashed her teeth. I was scared to death by him. Lu Yi was about to reply when another message came. This time, it was from Walnut. She obviously knew that Lu Yi would not stop at the 3rd place, and would soon challenge Abdullah and Gu Sheng. So she sent him some information about these 2 people. Just as he finished reading Walnut's message, a 3rd message came in. This time, it was from Gui Yi. She also sent some information about Abdullah and Gu Sheng. She and Lu Yi were both Yu Yao. 3 days before the battle rankings were released, she must have been busy ranking as well. It wasn't surprising that she had noticed the change in Lu Ye's ranking. Moreover, she was the one who had brought Lu Yi into the Azura arena. Naturally, she knew that Lu Yi lacked information about the top 2 rankers of the Yu Yao rankings. She had taken the initiative to send Lu Yi a message, so that he wouldn't be at a disadvantage in the battle. Lu Yi felt very busy. First, he thanked Gui Yi. Then he sent a message to Walnut. Only then did he have the time to talk to Yu Yao Rao. If you want to continue challenging them, you have to be careful. I heard that the top 2 on the Yu Yao ranking are ridiculously strong. Tianyan has been challenging them, but has never succeeded. I have a slight understanding of it. Lu Yi replied. Regardless of whether it was Walnut or Gui Yi's information, they had indirectly confirmed the strength of these 2. It was also at this moment that Lu Yi finally understood why Gu Sheng and Abdullah's victory rate wasn't high. When he had looked at the information about these 2, he had felt it was very strange. This was undoubtedly somewhat abnormal for the top 2 rankers of the Yu Yao rankings. Only now did he know that all of their defeats were bestowed upon each other. There was a rumor in the Yu Yao battlefield. That was Gu Sheng and Abdullah were in the 1st rank, Tianyan was in the 2nd rank, and those 3 were in the 3rd rank. Ever since Gu Sheng and Abdullah had occupied the top 2 rankers of the Yu Yao rankings, no one had ever shaken their rankings. The only ones who could change their rankings were themselves. This had also directly led to Tianyan's title as the eternal 3rd ranker. Every time before the Yu Yao battlefield's results were released, Gu Sheng and Abdullah would have a battle. Both of them had won and lost. This time, Lu Yi saw that Gu Sheng was ranked 1st. However, the previous time, it was Abdullah. Perhaps it was Gu Sheng before that. Therefore, every time 3 days before the Yu Yao rankings results were released, the Yu Yao battlefield would be extremely lively. Countless cultivators would enter the battlefield to watch the battle between these 2. Every battle between them dazzled the eyes of the spectators and caused them to gasp in amazement. As usual, there were many cultivators waiting for their battle to begin. While Lu Yi was busy communicating with the girls, outside a cave in the heavenly Azura realm, a tall and sturdy man wearing a beast skin cloak stood still. He looked like an iron tower. This person's chest was bare, and there was a tattoo of a roaring tiger's head engraved on his chest. It was very lifelike. His hair was shaved, and there was only a small patch of long hair at the back of his head that was braided into a small braid. He raised his large hand and slammed it heavily on the door of the cave in front of him. Instantly, banging sounds could be heard from the cave. He shouted, "Gu Sheng, open the door!" An angry voice immediately came from inside. "There's no one at home." The tall and sturdy man grinned. "Stop talking nonsense and open the door. Grandpa's here to see you." He continued banging on the door. The owner of the cave was helpless. He knew that if he didn't let this barbarian in, he would only continue to chatter. He opened the door and looked at him with disdain. "What are you doing here?" The owner of the cave didn't look very old. Most importantly, he was extremely beautiful with fair skin. If one didn't listen to him, and didn't have the physical characteristics that a woman should have, anyone who saw him would think that he was a peerless beauty. In fact, in terms of appearance alone, his appearance was indeed far superior to most so-called beauties. However, those who knew him definitely wouldn't let their imaginations run wild because of his appearance. This was because he was one of the top experts in the Yu Yao realm, whose name shook the entire Azura realm. He was Gu Sheng from the Yellow Dragon realm. The tall and sturdy man who came to see him was the barbarian tribe's Abro from the ancient barbarian realm. In the Azura realm, many people only knew that these 2 would fight once every 2 months. It was extremely intense, as if they had some irreconcilable grudge. However, very few people knew that the 2 of them were actually very close in private. Gu Sheng stood in front of Abro. His height barely reached his chest. Moreover, for some reason, Gu Sheng's face was extremely pale, without a single trace of blood. He had a sickly beauty to him. From afar, this scene gave off a strange feeling of a tiger sniffing a rose. "Grandpa is here to see if you're dead or not." Abro looked Gu Sheng up and down. "What happened, little brother?" I heard that you were heavily injured during your training? What a rare thing. Gu Xing snorted coldly. Injuries were common during training. However, he had suffered a bit too much this time, and almost didn't return alive. Are you done looking? Then scram. As he spoke, he was about to close the door when Abro hurriedly said, Since I'm already here, aren't you going to invite me in? Gu Xing said, There's no wine or food in the house. It's inconvenient to entertain guests. Abro flipped his hand and took out a wine bottle. He chuckled and said, I brought my own. Gu Xing looked at him with a helpless expression and gritted his teeth. You barbarian. He couldn't refuse because even if he refused the other party, Abro wouldn't let him go so easily. He could only take out the Azura token and shoot a profound light at him to let him in. It was clearly not Abro's first time here. Although the cave was large, he was very familiar with the place. He took the lead and walked into the bedroom. Then he pointed at the jade bed beside him and said, Take off your clothes and lie on it. Gu Sheng's face trembled and became much paler. He stood still and said warily, What are you doing? Abro turned to look at him and patted the wine bottle he had brought. Do you think I'm really here to drink with you? This is a medicinal wine specially made by my barbarian race. With the help of my race's secret healing method, I guarantee that you'll recover from your injuries in 3 days. Hurry up and heal my injuries. If you fight with me, I don't want others to say that I have an unfair advantage. No need. Gu Sheng's expression changed greatly. Even when he was in danger during his training, he wasn't as panicked as he was now. Although he knew that the barbarian race's secret healing method and their special medicinal wine were very effective, he had tried it before and still had some lingering fear. What nonsense are you spouting? Abdullah slapped Gu Sheng's shoulder, causing him to bend down. Then he grabbed him and threw him onto the bed. While doing so, he tore off his outer clothes. I'll do it myself. Seeing Abro walk towards him step by step with a fierce glint in his eyes, Gu Xing knew that he couldn't refuse and hurriedly shouted. After a short while, Gu Xing lay on the bed in his underwear. Abro's 2 large hands were like red-hot iron, turning into afterimages as they slapped Gu Xing's body. The slapping sounds were very rhythmic. Gu Sheng's face was blood red, and his expression was one of suffering that was worse than death. There was no other reason. As Abro activated the barbarian race's secret healing method, his blood and chi were surging out of his control. The feeling was very uncomfortable. Abro, however, said with interest, Brat, you must have reincarnated into the wrong body. Your body and skin are better than all the women I've seen. Gu Sheng's face was red, and his heart was filled with humiliation. He cursed loudly. Are you crazy? Just as he finished speaking, he spat out a mouthful of blood. The blood was pitch black. Abro snickered. See, I told you not to talk when you're healing. You've suffered retribution, haven't you? Gu Xing immediately shut his mouth and pretended that he was already dead. Suddenly, Abro's movement stopped, and his tone was surprised. Someone actually challenged me? After saying that, he continued slapping and muttered to himself, Forget it. Let him wait for a while. I'm afraid that Brat Tian Yen is itching for a beating again. The only one who could challenge him now was Tian Yen. Although Tian Yan's strength was not as good as his and Gu Sheng's, he had a tenacity. He kept on fighting despite repeated defeats. Who knew how many times he had suffered at the hands of Abro and Gu Sheng's hands? However, whenever he had the chance, he would still challenge them. What a cultivator needed the most was this kind of indomitable spirit. So Abro did not underestimate Tian Yen, just because he was not his match. End of chapter. Chapter 1909. After a while, Abdullah stood up and said to Gu Sheng, who was still lying on the bed, Good grandson, lie down. Grandpa will be back soon. After saying this, his burly figure suddenly disappeared. Sensing that he had already entered the battle arena, Gu Sheng grimaced in pain and wailed, his expression filled with extreme pain. But then again, the special medicinal wine of the barbarian race was supplemented by their special healing methods, and the effect was indeed remarkable. In just a short period of time, the injuries he had suffered before were already showing signs of improvement. Abdullah said that he would be able to recover in 3 days, and it was not empty talk. But when he thought about how this pain would last for 3 days, Gu Sheng felt that there was nothing left to live for. He was most afraid of pain. In the battle arena, Lu Yi and Abdullah's figures appeared in the enclosed battle arena at the same time. Lu Yi raised his eyes and looked at the number on the screen, then sent a message to Walnut. Only then did he begin to size up his opponent. At a glance, he found that the barbarian race was just like the rumors said. The barbarian race did not look much different from the human race, except that they were enlarged several times. Abdullah's figure was extremely tall and sturdy, and he was wearing an animal skin cloak. On his exposed chest was a lifelike roaring tiger's head, and he was standing there picking his nose casually. But soon, Abdullah's expression froze, because he found that his opponent this time was not the familiar Tian Yen. Who is this? His eyes widened to the size of copper bells, and he seriously sized up Lu Ye's figure, confirming that he had never seen this person before. This was strange. Although there would be newcomers in the Azura battle arena from time to time, it was rare to see someone suddenly appear like this. Only then did he remember to check his Azura token, because if Lu Yi challenged him, the Azura token would have recorded the information. After a while, Abdullah showed an interested expression, because he found that his opponent's battle record was astonishingly beautiful. So far, he had experienced more than 200 battles, and had not lost a single one. This undoubtedly meant one thing. This human was indeed a newcomer to the Azura battle arena, and he had made great progress in the Yu Yao battle arena, fighting his way to 3rd place, and had the qualifications to stand in front of him. Unfortunately, he did not know what his name was, because Lu Yi had hidden his name and origin in the battle arena. So Abdullah naturally could not see it. All he could see was Lu Ye's battle record. Abdullah's eyes lit up. To be honest, Gu Sheng was indeed a very good opponent. Every time they crossed swords, he would have to go all out. However, in this huge Azura arena, if there was only one opponent, it would be a little too boring. Just like this time, when he heard that Gu Sheng was heavily injured, he had to personally run over to treat him. Otherwise, he would not be able to fight in the future. If there were a few more opponents like Gu Sheng in the Azura arena, why would he need to be so worried? And this human soldier cultivator in front of him was able to defeat Tian Yen. His strength should be pretty good. The 30 breaths of preparation time quickly passed. The number of people in the originally sparse grandstand rapidly increased. The competition between the top few people in the fighting arena would always attract the attention of many people. Under the call of friends, the seats in the grandstand were quickly filled. The moment the power binding the two sides suddenly disappeared, 2 huge waves of air erupted under Lu Yi and Abdullah's feet, and the two quickly rushed towards each other. In the blink of an eye they collided. Without any warning or foreshadowing, Lu Yi swung his blade down, and Abdullah raised his fist to meet it. With a loud boom, the shattered transcendence energy of the collision swept out in all directions. The two figures instantly went from extreme motion to extreme stillness. In just a moment of deadlock, the two involuntarily leaned back, and then their bodies fell back down. A second collision erupted, then a third, a fourth. Cries of surprise rang out from the spectators in the stands. Such a violent and direct confrontation was rare in a battle between cultivators. Not to mention, it was an evenly matched battle. Although the spectators were unable to truly experience the danger of the battle, due to the isolation of the battle arena, they could tell that this was Yu Yao's ultimate clash, just by looking at the shockwaves from the battle between the two of them. No one had ever been able to fight Abdullah without being at a disadvantage in a direct confrontation. Lu Ye's mountain plate blade had already turned into an afterimage, and Abdullah's fists had also turned into a rain of punches. Strangely, in such a terrifying and intense confrontation, the two of them did not move in the slightest. Whether it was the tall and sturdy Abdullah, or the short Lu Yi, their bodies seemed to be nailed to the ground. Ha 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 ha. In the midst of this intense confrontation, Abdullah couldn't help but laugh heartily. His laughter was filled with delight, as if a wild beast that had been bound for countless years had finally broken free. The momentum of his punches became even more ferocious and astonishing. But what made him ecstatic was that no matter how ferocious his punches were, this human weapon cultivator was actually able to withstand them. In a short 10 breaths of time, after countless clashes, the two of them finally broke away from the deadlock and drifted back. Standing still, Abdullah's blood and chi surged as he stared at Lu Yi with a scorching gaze. He shouted, "Awesome, awesome. You're so much stronger than that stone block Tianyan. No wonder you could beat him." In the grandstand, Tianyan, who had come to spectate after receiving the news, almost cursed out loud. "If you want to fight, then fight. Why drag me into this? What did I do to provoke you?" Abdullah was still in an excited state. "It looks like I'll have another opponent in this Azura arena in the future." And it was an opponent that was very much to his liking. In comparison, Gu Sheng was simply a pile of shit. It wasn't that Gu Sheng wasn't strong enough, but because Gu Sheng was a spell cultivator. When he, a brute, fought with Gu Sheng kept jumping around, making him feel like he was chasing a rabbit. He simply couldn't experience the exhilaration of a battle of pure strength. All of a sudden, the smile on Abdullah's face turned into madness, and he looked like he was excited to see a prey. As his chi and blood surged, his already burly body seemed to have collided again, and his eyes were filled with a ferocious light. "Then let's enjoy this battle to the fullest." The moment he finished speaking, he pounced towards Lu Yi again. Although he was big, and in terms of cultivation system, he should be a body cultivator, but he had a speed that ordinary body cultivators simply didn't have. This was the uniqueness of the brute race's cultivation system. In the entire galaxy, there was no other cultivator who came from the ancient brute world. As he ran, the lifelike tiger head on his chest suddenly bloomed with light. At the same time, veined patterns lit up all over his body, and his tall and sturdy figure rapidly changed. It's coming, Savage Beast 9 transformations." An excited voice rang out from the stands. The person who spoke clearly had some understanding of Abdullah's background. The Savage Beast 9 transformations he spoke of was the brute race's secret technique that Abdullah cultivated. It was also what he relied on to fight against his opponent. In the entire Yu Yao battle arena, there were only two people who could use the Savage Beast 9 transformations for him. One was his sworn enemy, Gu Sheng, and the other was Tianyan. However, Tianyan was still too weak. Under normal circumstances, once Abdullah used the secret technique, Tianyan would lose. This was the huge gap between the two Yu Yao. Abdullah's figure was still in human form when he moved, but as he ran, his flesh, blood, and bones were wriggling and transforming rapidly. By the time he arrived in front of Lu Yi, he had transformed into a ferocious and terrifying giant tiger with black and white fur that was more than 15 meters long. In the primordial era, living beings didn't have good cultivation methods. In order to deal with the attacks of the ancient beasts, the brute race ancestors of the ancient brute world studied the forms of the ancient beasts and created the first savage beast transformations. The brute race's Tao of tattoos also became popular at that time, because if one wanted to use the savage beast transformations, they had to supplement it with the Tao of tattoos. It was because of the brute race's ancestors that the brute race was able to survive in the harsh environment of the ancient times and pass it down to the present day. This was a secret technique unique to the brute race, and it was difficult for cultivators of any other race to cultivate it. Roar! The tiger's roar rang out, and visible ripples spread out in all directions. It was obvious that the roar wasn't just loud. Lu Yi, who bore the brunt of the attack, immediately sensed that the tiger's roar had a mind-sucking effect. He was all too familiar with this. Hoopa also had this kind of divine power. When he was still weak, he and Hoopa had teamed up to kill enemies, and it was Hoopa's roar that drew the curtains to the battle. He could clearly feel his soul's defensive barrier being attacked. And then, there was no then. This mind-sucking roar would often have a miraculous effect if it was used against someone with a weaker soul than the caster. But if it was used against someone with a stronger soul, then it would only be loud. Lu Ye's soul had never been weak. Since the beginning of his cultivation, he had refined many treasures that could increase his soul power, which directly led to him forming a spirit sea when he was still in the true lake realm. Many years ago, he also obtained the rainbow god lotus, which had the effect of nourishing the soul. Even if Lu Yi didn't do anything, it would constantly nourish his soul and strengthen his soul power. Therefore, this tiger's roar was like a gentle breeze to Lu Ye's ears. The tiger's roar was only a test, and the real killing move followed. The tiger that Abro transformed into pounced down, and 2 washbasin-sized claws shone with a cold light. As it swung down, it opened its mouth and bit towards Lu Yi. That bloody mouth bared its fangs, and if one were to be bitten, half of one's body would be gone. Under such a ferocious attack, the hearts of countless cultivators in the stands rose to their throats. Lu Yi, on the other hand, didn't move at all. He steadied his body and his long saber spun. The moment the tiger pounced, a great sun suddenly exploded. The large sun was like a lotus flower, and it bloomed layer by layer. Each petal was an extremely ferocious saber light, and it enveloped the tiger's body. The tiger's roar rang out again, and it was deafening. The saber lotus spun, and the light was resplendent, making it impossible for people to see the battle clearly. The most nervous person in the stands was Walnut. Under her master's instigation, she had once again placed her bet on Lu Yi, so she was naturally very nervous. End of chapter. Chapter 1910. When Walnut bet on Lu Yi in the last match, she had made up her mind. Because of Heaven Inkstone's reputation, she didn't know if Lu Yi could win. But Lu Yi actually won, even though she didn't understand what was going on. In fact, she didn't want to bet on this match because Abdullah's reputation was too great. She felt that no matter how strong Lu Yi was, it was impossible for him to be stronger than Abdullah. If she bet, it would only be a waste. She had already won enough before. But she couldn't resist her honored master's persuasion. She didn't know why, but in a moment of confusion, she had bet all her Azura seals on Lu Yi. But now it was too late for regret. She was so nervous that her palms were sweating. She couldn't help but ask, "Honored master, which one of them is stronger?" The woman on the side was watching the battle in the arena with a grim expression. "Lu Yi is at a disadvantage. It doesn't look good." "Ah." Walnut's voice trembled, her entire body going limp. "I'm just kidding. Look at your useless appearance. You can't even handle this little bit of wind and rain? How will I take you out to see the world in the future?" The woman glanced at her disciple. How could she know who was stronger? If she encountered such a battle outside, she could still make a clear judgment, because she could perceive it through her divine sense. However, the barrier of the fighting arena blocked her perception. She could only rely on her eyes to see, and she could not see much at all. "Honored master, you're hurting me." Walnut lowered her head and looked at her hand, which was now in her honored master's grasp. Honored master was obviously not as calm as she looked. Indeed, this was the battle with the most bets in her honored master's history. It would be a lie to say that she wasn't nervous, but she knew that compared to being nervous, her honored master actually enjoyed the process of waiting for the result more. At this moment, in the middle of the battlefield, the gradually expanding saber lotus suddenly collapsed, revealing the figures of a man and a tiger. Another round of exclamations rang out from the stands. This was because the claws of the tiger transformed by Sibuluo were blocked by Lu Ye's saber and scabbard respectively, and the tiger opened its bloody mouth to bite down on his head. If this bite connected, victory and defeat would be decided immediately. However, at this moment, Lu Ye's blood vitality suddenly surged. Her hands exerted strength, and with a surge of magic power, she directly pushed the tiger away. The eyes of the tiger that Abdullah had transformed into were clearly filled with astonishment. In the first clash, he had already sensed that Lu Ye's physical strength was not inferior to his own. This was undoubtedly somewhat inconceivable, because Lu Yi was clearly a weapon cultivator. It was more or less abnormal for a weapon cultivator to possess such power. He had thought that was the limit of Lu Ye's power. However, that was not his limit. After performing the savage beast transformation and transforming into an ancient tiger, his physical strength had increased by at least 20%. Who would have thought that Lu Yi would actually be able to receive it? He was certain that Lu Yi hadn't used any kind of secret technique. This was undoubtedly his own strength. There was actually someone in this world with such a sturdy physique. Abdul was shocked, but he was also excited. He knew that he had underestimated Lu Yi. Lu Yi was indeed an opponent who was qualified to compete with him. His figure flew far away, and as soon as he landed, Abdullah felt an extremely oppressive aura pressing down on him. He looked up and saw Lu Yi charging over with his saber in hand. Roar! Another tiger roar rang out, and the tiger's figure changed again. Lines on the surface of his body lit up, and the giant tiger rapidly thinned, but his overall body undoubtedly became smoother. Lu Yi watched this scene. Although he had learned from Gui Yi and Walnut that Abdullah cultivated the savage beast transformation, he was still slightly surprised to see it with his own eyes. Transforming into a tiger was Abdullah's first transformation, and at this moment, he had undoubtedly displayed the second. All of a sudden, the tiger transformed into a pitch-black cheetah. Lu Yi's swift slash actually brushed past the cheetah's body and struck empty air. Instead, the cheetah took the opportunity to attack from the side. Its movements were much faster than before. Lu Yi raised his saber to block, but the huge force caused his body to involuntarily slide to the side. Before he could stabilize himself, the cheetah pounced again. Lu Yi roughly understood that each transformation of the savage beast transformation had its own unique characteristics. Compared to the savage tiger transformation, Abdullah's speed had been greatly increased by the second transformation. He exhaled softly, and the flesh on his saber-wielding right arm began to wriggle. In an instant, saber light filled the sky. The spectating cultivators in the stands were dumbfounded, because at this moment, the speed of the man and the beast's battle was so fast that they could not see clearly. In addition to the saber light filling the sky, there seemed to be countless Lu Yis and Abdullahs, each and every one of them competing with Abdullah. Even Honored Walnut's honored master could not tell which was the real body and which was the illusion without using his divine sense. Abdullah was extremely excited, but at the same time, he was also shocked, because he never thought that there would be such a person in this world. When he used the savage tiger transformation, his strength was inferior to his opponent's, but when he transformed into a cheetah, his opponent was actually able to keep up with his speed. If he had not personally experienced it, he would not have dared to believe that such a balanced cultivation existed in this world. Suddenly, the saber light filling the sky disappeared, along with the countless afterimages. In the center of the field, Lu Yi maintained his saber posture, but the place where he stood was already occupied by a giant python. The giant python raised its head in a spiral shape, flicking its forked tongue. The giant python's body suddenly contracted, and the surrounding space turned into a cage, obviously trying to bind Lu Yi. At this moment, Lu Yi's hair stood on end. If he was really bound like this, with the strength that Abdullah had shown before, even if he had other means, it would be difficult for him to use them. Activating the vertical sweep technique, he waved his saber to break the invisible imprisoning force around him, almost jumping out the moment the giant python's body tightened. In this situation, unless he used his imperial item to draw the void spirit rune in advance, he could only use the vertical sweep technique to escape. When he leaped into the air and was about to pounce down, his eyes narrowed. The giant python had already disappeared and was replaced by an indomitable minotaur. It was as if an ox demon had transformed into a human form. Two inverted horns lingered with a cold light, and thick hair covered its entire body. Its body was more than 100 feet tall, and it brought about an extremely terrifying visual impact. The fourth transformation, a cultivator on the grandstand exclaimed. When Abdullah fought with Gu Sheng, the highest he could display was the 5 transformations of savage beasts. I never thought that he would have to display the 4 transformations of savage beasts against Lu Yi. I wonder if Lu Yi would be able to force him to his limits. The Minotaur demon Abdullah stared at Lu Yi with his scarlet eyes, then suddenly raised a foot and stomped on the ground. Without a sound, pitch-black cracks spread out in all directions from where he stomped, as if the entire space had been broken by his stomp. Lu Yi suddenly felt his vision turn upside down, immediately understanding that he had been affected by his opponent's move. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Abdullah stretched out a large hand and swatted it at Lu Yi with a momentum that blotted out the sky. It looked like he was swatting at a buzzing mosquito, Although the arena was large, Luyi felt as if he couldn't dodge Abdullah's attack. He made a prompt decision and closed his eyes. When he opened them again, his magic power ferociously poured into the mountain pan saber. He raised the saber high, and the blade shone brightly. In the blink of an eye, a giant saber shadow appeared. The size of the saber shadow was astonishing. The Minotaur demon's palm blotted out the sky, and the saber shadow slashed down at the same time. Heaven-splitting saber. The collision of magic power caused countless vortexes to appear in the arena, blurring the figures of the two combatants. Only the sonorous cry of a bird could be heard. When the spectators once again saw the scene in the arena, they were all shocked to discover that Abdullah had already used the fifth transformation of the Savage Beast transformation. He had turned into a golden-winged roc, and beside the roc, there was a tiny figure fighting with him with a saber. The battle was extremely intense. Streaks of golden light shot out as the great Pung flapped its wings, but they couldn't harm Luyi at all. Instead, they were used by him, causing the golden-winged great Pung to be flustered. Luyi realized that each transformation of Abdullah's Savage Beast transformation was stronger than the previous one. There should be no order in this transformation. In other words, if the tiger transformation was Abdullah's fifth transformation, then the tiger transformation would be the strongest. At this moment, his fifth transformation was the golden-winged roc, so this form was the strongest. At this moment, the pressure Luyi felt from Abdullah's strength was much stronger than it had been in the beginning, but it was still within the range of what he could handle. Luyi was looking forward to Abdullah's sixth transformation. As far as he knew, the Savage Beast transformation's real name was the Savage Beast 9 transformations. In other words, there were a total of 9 transformations, so Luyi wanted to know how strong Abdullah would be in the 9th transformation. While he was thinking, Abdullah suddenly retreated. Luyi frowned slightly and didn't pursue. The golden-winged roc quickly shrunk and returned to Abdullah's appearance. His skin was now incomparably red, as if it was soaked in blood. His eyes were filled with fighting spirit as he spat out visible qi. Amazing! You're the second opponent besides Gu Sheng to withstand my 5th transformation. I want to see the 6th transformation. Luyi looked at him. Abdullah laughed loudly. That won't do. My foundation is not enough. If I use the 6th transformation, I'll lose my life. It's a desperate move. Luyi was stunned. Originally, he was wondering why Gu Sheng only used the 5th transformation in his fight with Abdullah, if the Savage Beast transformation had 9 transformations. It turned out that there was such a reason. Even someone as strong as Abdullah could only use the 5th transformation. If he forcefully used the 6th transformation, even if he managed to kill his opponent, he wouldn't have a good ending. There was indeed a rule in place to protect the cultivators of both sides from losing their lives during the battle. But this protection did not apply to Abdullah, who had used his 6th transformation. The injuries a cultivator would receive during the battle were real and tangible. Once Abdullah used the 6th transformation, the huge damage to his foundation was enough to cause him to lose his life. That's a pity. Luyi felt a little regretful. He had a rough understanding of Abdullah's strength. He was stronger than Lionheart, so it seemed that Gu Sheng was about the same level. This made him feel a little disappointed. Was this the standard of the top 2 on the Yu Yao ranking? End of chapter. Chapter 1911. Just as Luyi was thinking about this, 5 explosive sounds suddenly rang out from Abdullah's body. Following the explosions, his aura became extremely dangerous. Luyi immediately understood that Abdullah's strongest form had appeared. He really couldn't use the 6th transformation. That was a secret technique he used to put his life on the line. Naturally, he couldn't use it to compete with Luyi, but that didn't mean he didn't have a stronger form. After the 5 transformations of the Savage Beast, Abdullah could also use another technique. With this technique, a portion of the improvements brought to him by each transformation would be stored in his body and would be unleashed at the same time at this moment. To put it simply, in this state, Abdullah had fused the buffs from the 5 transformations. Although there was a limit to the buffs, it was undoubtedly more powerful than the 5 transformations alone. Most importantly, it would not damage his foundation, and his life would not be in danger. Every time he fought with Gu Sheng, the victor would be decided in this kind of state. For so many years, only Gu Sheng could force him into this state, but today Lu Yi had appeared. At this moment, Abdullah didn't have any of his beast form. Instead, he had returned to his original form, but his body seemed to be 30% larger. When Lu Yi looked at him, he felt as if his entire body had turned into a black hole, swallowing everything around him. What surprised Lu Yi even more was that an eye-catching symbol had suddenly appeared on Abdullah's forehead. It was a star-shaped pattern that felt strangely familiar to him. Lu Yi was stunned for a moment, but he soon realized that Abdullah had also condensed the flower of the body. He was a cultivator who had reached the peak of the constellation realm. That's right, according to his understanding of the three flowers, this was a very ancient method that belonged to the cultivators of ancient times. The current cultivation environment wasn't suitable for the promotion of this ancient method, so the three flowers had long since been eliminated. However, the ancient barbarian world where the barbarians came from had always maintained the cultivation environment of the desolate era. As an outstanding member of the barbarians, it wasn't strange that Abdullah cultivated the three flowers. It could even be said that the barbarians were the most suitable to cultivate the three flowers in this world. Other cultivators who came from other parts of the starry sky didn't have such a convenient and unique environment. The appearance of the flower of the body meant that Abdullah was prepared to go all out. Lu Ye's expression turned serious. All of a sudden, the phenomena around Abdo vanished, and even the flower of the body disappeared. At this moment, Abdo returned to his normal state. Many of the cultivators in the stands were confused and instinctively thought that Abdullah's secret technique had failed, causing the phenomena to disappear. However, Lu Yi, who was directly facing him, knew that this wasn't a sign of the secret technique's failure. Instead, it was because Abdullah had perfect control over his own power, that no external force leaked out. This is getting interesting. Lu Yi had been wondering why the top two experts on the Yueyao ranking were so weak, but now he knew that they were indeed quite capable. Let's fight. Abdullah softly spat out a few words. Just as his voice fell, his afterimage was still in place, but his real body had already arrived in front of Lu Yi. Wrapped in an unstoppable momentum, he punched towards Lu Yi. Compared to before, his speed was much faster. This punch almost brushed past Lu Yi's body. When the fist landed, it didn't spread any power, as if it was just an ordinary punch. However, Lu Yi, who was flying backwards, suddenly felt half of his body go numb. In the next instant, the space where he was originally standing shattered like a shattered mirror. Although it quickly recovered, he could still see the power of this punch. His heart trembled. He had only been grazed by the opponent's fist, but if he had been hit, even with his current physique, he would have been defeated immediately. Abdullah was definitely the strongest Yueyao he had ever seen. Compared to Lionheart, who he had killed in the 10,000 Elephant Sea, he was on a completely different level. After missing his punch, Abdullah pressed forward and punched again. This time, Lu Yi didn't retreat and raised his saber to meet the attack. The moment the fist and saber collided, a violent explosion resounded throughout the arena. But that was all. After a short while, the expressions of the cultivators in the spectators' stands became strange, because the fighting state of the two in the fighting arena was rather strange at this moment. As far as the eye could see, their speed was not fast, far from the dazzling intensity from before. Even if it was only one constellation, one could still clearly see the attacks and defenses between them. What was even more strange and puzzling was that every time they clashed, only sounds would be heard. There was no leakage of transcendence energy, nor was there any dazzling light. The two figures, one big and one small, both had serious expressions on their faces. They were fighting very seriously. But to put it bluntly, even a fight between cultivators in the spirit stream realm, who had just started cultivating, would be more interesting than a fight between these two. The constellations couldn't see much of it. They only felt that the fight between Lu Yi and Abdullah was far less exciting than the fight between Abdullah and Gu Sheng. If these two were to clash, it would be like lightning striking the earth, fighting in full swing, dazzling the spectators. Then they looked at what was in front of them. Yu Yao, on the other hand, was deep in thought. Beside Walnut, her master couldn't help but sit up straight. Her expression was solemn as she watched the fight in the arena, her face full of disbelief. These two guys. Master, what's wrong? Walnut had never seen her master reveal such an expression. Surprise, shock, and even some yearning? The woman stared at the two figures in the arena and exclaimed, "Sure enough, there are new talents in every generation. If these two can advance to the Sunshine Realm, their futures will definitely be limitless. No, with their current aptitude and foundation, advancing to the Sunshine Realm will definitely not be a problem." Walnut's eyes turned, and she deliberately said, "They're only fighting like this. How can Master see anything?" She vaguely sensed something, but due to her limited eyesight, she couldn't be sure, so she wanted to ask her master for some guidance. The woman said, "What do you know? Don't think that just because their fight isn't exciting they can't do it. In fact, these two people's control of their own power has reached an unimaginable level. That's why there aren't any aftershocks in their every clash, because none of their power is wasted. Just this point alone is something that not many people in the starry sky can achieve." "Then what about you, Master?" Walnut asked. The woman didn't say anything. If it were under normal circumstances, she would naturally be able to achieve this. But if she was fighting with an opponent of similar strength, it was simply impossible. This was because if the opponent's strength was on par with hers, she would have to fight with her life on the line. Under such circumstances, who could completely control their own power? She couldn't do it, but the two guys below could. Just this point alone made her inferior to those two little guys. In the arena, Abdullah's expression was incomparably serious, but the surprise in his eyes couldn't be concealed. Lu Yi being able to withstand his 5 beast transformations was already shocking enough. But who would have thought that he couldn't do anything to the other party in this state? It should be known that even Gu Sheng wouldn't dare to face him head-on in this state. Of course, Gu Sheng was a Dharma cultivator, and would never be able to compete with him in this way. But this human opposite him had done it. He had used a secret technique, but what about the other party? From beginning to end, he had never seen the other party use a secret technique that could increase his strength. In other words, the strength that the other party was displaying at this moment was something that he already possessed in his normal state. This was simply too shocking. As these thoughts flashed through his mind, he suddenly saw the aura on Lu Ye's body change. In an instant, Abdullah couldn't help but feel an extreme sense of danger. He knew that Lu Yi was about to use a killing move, so he didn't dare to be careless. He immediately focused his attention on the attack. But what made him feel strange was that Lu Yi didn't show any signs of using a killing move. He continued to slash down with his saber just like before. As Abdullah raised his arm to block, he clenched his other hand into a fist and punched at Lu Ye's chest. The moment the Pan Mountain saber came into contact with Abdullah's arm, Lu Ye's right hand, along with the Pan Mountain saber, suddenly began to vibrate violently. This vibration was difficult to detect unless it came into direct contact. From an outsider's point of view, Lu Ye's saber didn't seem to have changed at all. Blood splattered. Abdullah's expression was somewhat stunned, and the spectating cultivators in the stands cried out in alarm. Abdullah was injured. The supreme powerhouse of Yu Yao, whose body was so powerful that it made cultivators of the same level feel despair, was actually injured. This was something that not even Gu Sheng could accomplish. In the past, when Abdullah and Gu Sheng fought, there were always times when Gu Sheng was injured, but Abdullah had never been injured. This was because all of Gu Sheng's techniques were unable to harm his terrifyingly tough body. Gu Sheng had always won, because Abdullah could no longer maintain his 5 transformations secret art. Although this secret art was powerful, the more powerful it was, the more energy it consumed. Abdullah couldn't maintain it for too long. But today, that ordinary saber strike had injured Abdullah and caused him to bleed. His blood wasn't a normal red, but a dark red that leaned toward black. This was a unique characteristic of the barbarian tribe. This unprecedented battle, this incomprehensible battle, instantly ignited the passion of all the cultivators in the stands. The battle between these two wasn't very exciting, But there was no doubt that this simple and unadorned battle contained great danger. The pain from his arm didn't affect Abdullah in the slightest. He ignored it and punched out with even more power. Lu Yi had no time to retreat. Layers of Holy Guardian Spirit inscriptions appeared on his chest. In the blink of an eye, there were more than a dozen layers. As a late-stage Yu Yao cultivator, any one of his Holy Guardian Spirit inscriptions could block an attack from a Yu Yao of the same level. But against Abdullah, he didn't dare to be careless. If not for the lack of time, he would have inscribed more than a dozen layers. With a crash, Abdullah's punch shattered all the layers of Holy Guardian Spirit inscriptions. Lu Yi's chest shook violently. End of chapter. Chapter 1912. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Abdullah's fist landed on Lu Yi's chest. Walnut didn't dare to look directly at it. She had long heard of Abdullah's strength. Would Lu Yi be able to withstand this punch? However, she relaxed in the next moment, because Lu Yi was able to withstand it. She vaguely saw something flash in front of Lu Yi's chest before Abdullah's fist landed. Spirit runes! Walnut exclaimed. She wasn't ignorant. On the contrary, after so many years in the Azure arena, she was much more knowledgeable than the average Yu Yao. However, wasn't the speed at which the spirit runes were constructed a little too quickly? From the looks of it, the spirit runes were probably used for defense. Otherwise, Lu Yi wouldn't have been unharmed. Lu Yi wasn't as calm as he appeared. Abdullah's fist was very hard. Even though he'd protected himself with more than 10 layers of divine defense, the punch still caused his blood to surge. Moreover, this was a weakened attack. One could only imagine what would have happened to him if he hadn't protected himself with divine defense. His body shook slightly before returning to normal. Then he slashed down again. Abdullah's expression changed. He hesitated for a moment between dodging this attack or blocking it. He immediately chose the former. He didn't have much time. With the support of his secret technique, he wouldn't be able to hold on for long. Therefore, he had to end this battle quickly. He was confident that he wouldn't lose to Yu Yao in terms of physical strength. Even though he sensed that Lu Yi had used spirit runes to block his attack, he still believed that he would be the one to last until the end. Injury for injury. Let's see who gives up first. When the Pan Mountain Saber descended, it once again began to vibrate intensely. In the previous battle against Lionheart, Lu Yi had suffered a similar loss. Lionheart had tempered his body to the point that it was too tough. Coupled with the protection of his magic power, Lu Yi found it difficult to break through his opponent's body. Otherwise, Lionheart wouldn't have been able to escape to the island of versatility. He would have been killed long ago in Zixian. Therefore, ever since that battle, Lu Yi had been considering a problem. What would he do if he encountered an opponent like Lionheart in the future? The Pan Mountain blade was sharp enough. With the support of the Divine Edge Spirit runes, it would become even sharper. However, there would always be defenses in this world that he couldn't break through. All this time, he hadn't thought of a good solution. Until one day, he suddenly remembered an item from the mortal world. It was a saw used for logging. Using a wooden saw to chop down a tree, even if it was just a small sapling, it might not succeed. But what if it was sawing back and forth with a wooden saw? Even a towering tree couldn't stop a small wooden saw. Now that he had an idea, the rest was easy. Lu Yi had spent half a year on the journey from the 10,000 Elephant Sea to the Azura Star Field. He had thought that this was just a simple trick, so it wouldn't be difficult to perfect it. However, as he explored deeper, he realized that it wasn't easy to do so. When fighting against a strong opponent, there was a limit to the amount of time the Pan Mountain blade could make contact with the enemy's body. If he wanted to break through the enemy's defense, he had to complete his plan in that instant. For this reason, Lu Yi spent a lot of time and effort. After many attempts, he finally managed to barely complete it before arriving at the Azura Star region. This was no longer a simple trick. Strictly speaking, this was a kind of saber technique. Lu Yi named it Vibrating Blade. Lu Yi immediately noticed that Abdullah's physique was even stronger than Lionheart's, so ordinary methods couldn't break through his defenses. Only Vibrating Blade had hope. Sure enough, he was pleasantly surprised. Even Abdullah's physique couldn't withstand Vibrating Blade's attacks. To him, As long as he could injure the enemy, victory was basically decided. Abdullah's method of exchanging injury for injury was exactly what he wanted. The battle suddenly became fierce. Two figures moved and flipped in the battle arena. Sabers and fists intersected. After half an incense stick's worth of time, Abdullah suddenly jumped back and raised his hand. "I'm done." Lu Yi, who was about to give chase, stopped and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He had also suffered some internal injuries in that fierce battle, but they weren't serious. The main problem was that his blood was surging, and he couldn't suppress it. On the other hand, Abdullah had countless wounds all over his body. His entire body was dripping with blood. At this moment, the corners of Abdullah's eyes twitched violently. The reason he dared to exchange injury for injury with Lu Yi was that his physique was stronger than Lu Ye's, and his recovery speed was faster. With his powerful physique, these superficial wounds didn't affect him at all, and could be healed in the blink of an eye. However, what puzzled him was that the injuries on his body showed no signs of recovery at all. Under careful observation, he could even sense a strange power around his wounds. It was this power that was hindering the recovery of his injuries. Admittedly, these injuries looked miserable, but they didn't affect him much. However, he couldn't hold on any longer. The duration of his secret technique was about to end. At that time, without the support of the 5 transformations, his strength would be greatly weakened, and he wouldn't be Lu Ye's opponent at all. Retreating at the right time was his only choice. In the stands, Tianyan was gloating. "That dog just used me as an excuse. Now he's tasting the bitter fruit." Huh? He had experienced it personally, and knew the consequences of being injured by Lu Ye's saber. "I concede," Abdullah shouted, his figure disappearing as soon as he finished speaking. After a brief moment of shock, the many cultivators in the stands suddenly burst into a burst of exclamations. Huado jumped 3 feet into the air. She won. Moreover, the benefits of this victory would definitely be greater than before, because there were too many cultivators watching this battle. Even if only a small portion of them placed their bets, how many of them would bet on Lu Yi like her and her master? Abdullah was defeated. Abdullah, who had always competed with Gu Sheng for the top of the Moon Jade ranking, and was invincible except for Gu Sheng, was defeated by a weapon cultivator who popped out of nowhere. Before this, almost no one had seen this weapon cultivator of the human clan. This kind of shock made all the cultivators watching the battle unable to recover for a long time. Then, they thought of something even more exciting. Now that the weapon cultivator of the human clan had defeated Abdullah and risen to second place on the Moon Jade ranking, would he continue to challenge Gu Sheng? Could he defeat him? If he could, wouldn't it mean that the true top of the Moon Jade ranking was about to be born? From now on, no one would be able to shake his position? Countless cultivators scrambled to send messages, inquiring about the weapon cultivator of the human clan. Unfortunately, because Lu Yi hid his name and origin in the arena, no one knew where he came from or what his name was. In the arena, as Abdullah's figure disappeared, Lu Ye's figure also quickly disappeared, returning to his cave residence. On the other side, Abdullah suddenly appeared in Gu Sheng's cave residence. Gu Sheng was still lying there in his underpants. Sensing Abdullah's aura, he said with some dissatisfaction, "What took you so long? Has Tianyan become stronger?" He knew Tianyan's strength very well. Tianyan would sometimes challenge him, because he was second on the Moon Jade ranking. Logically speaking, Abdullah should not have needed so much time to deal with Tianyan, unless Tianyan had become much stronger. However, this was not impossible. In this Azura field, it was common for people to suddenly obtain a fortuitous encounter and greatly increase their strength. Abdullah didn't know how to speak. When he received the challenge, he said something about going and coming back, but he was beaten up violently when he went. Gu Sheng suddenly sensed that something was wrong, because with Abdullah's return, the cave residence was filled with a thick bloody smell. He turned his head to look, and his eyes widened. He slowly got up and sized Abdullah up for a while. Then he was extremely shocked. "Tianyan is so strong now. How did he beat you up like this?" At this moment, Abdullah's aura was somewhat weak. This was undoubtedly the aftereffect of using a secret technique. Moreover, His entire body was covered in wounds. The flesh and blood of those wounds were overturned, and blood flowed as if it couldn't be stopped. He looked extremely miserable. Tianyin is nothing. Abdullah curled his lips. It's not Tianyin? Gu Sheng was stunned, then immediately realized. No, Tianyin doesn't use weapons. Your injuries really weren't left by Tianyin. He hurriedly took out the Azura token to check, then looked up in shock. You lost. Gu Sheng was shocked. When he saw Abdullah's injuries, he was somewhat gloating, because he had never seen him like this before. But after checking the Yu Yao ranking, he was shocked to find that Abdullah had fallen to 3rd place. A person he had never seen before had replaced Abdullah's ranking. Who is this person? Gu Sheng asked. Abdullah scratched his face. I don't know where he came from. You were beaten up like this and you don't know his name? I was too excited and forgot to ask. Abdullah was slightly embarrassed. Then he waved his hand. I'm injured, but he's not much better. My 2 iron fists hammered him until he spat out 3 liters of blood and was heavily injured. If it wasn't for my secret technique's time being up, I wouldn't have lost to him. Gu Sheng glanced at him from the corner of her eyes. So he's supporting himself with a heavily injured body and didn't rest at all before challenging me? He challenged you? Abdullah asked in shock. Gu Sheng nodded. He was now 1st place on the Yu Yao ranking, so the only person he could challenge was the 2nd place. Abdullah's eyes darted around. Then he urged, don't panic, he's very strong. But after fighting with me, he's less than 1/10 of his strength. You go and kill him. I'll wait here to celebrate with you. Gu Sheng frowned as he looked at him. Although he felt that Abdullah was exaggerating, he understood Abdullah's strength. He didn't believe that someone on the Yu Yao ranking could take down Abdullah without any injuries. So it was true that Abdullah was injured, but he didn't know how much strength he had left. It just so happened that he was also heavily injured, so neither of them could take advantage of the other. Moreover, as the 1st place, there was no reason for him not to accept a challenge. He immediately nodded and said, then I'll be right back. As he spoke, he put on his clothes, accepted the challenge and disappeared. Abdullah stood in place and sniffed, then grimaced. End of chapter. Chapter 1913. Abdaluo did not have to wait for long. In just half an incense stick's time, Gu Sheng's figure reappeared in the cave, covered in blood. He cursed at Abdaluo. Are you King sick in the head? Didn't he say that he would smash the opponent until he had less than 1/10 of his strength left? Although he knew that Abdaluo was exaggerating, he did not expect him to be bluffing. There was not a single trace of injury on the human cultivator's body. Moreover, after using his Fa, his speed was extremely fast. On the other hand, Gu Sheng, who was heavily injured, could not dodge at all. After fighting for a while, he was forced out of the cave by a few slashes. If Gu Sheng was at his peak, he would not have lost so quickly. His strength was on par with Abdaluo's. If Abdaluo was not a match for the human cultivator, he probably would not have been able to either. However, he should have been able to hold on for a while. In the end, he was the one who suffered a few slashes and was bleeding profusely. He did not even manage to find out the other party's strength. Abdaluo turned a deaf ear to Gu Sheng's curses. He frowned and pondered for a long time before he said in surprise. So he really did not use his full strength. When he fought with Lu Yi, he had a feeling that Lu Ye's strength was increasing step by step as he used the savage beast transformation. The other party did not seem to be in a hurry to determine the victor. He seemed to want to hone himself in such a battle. This was not unusual. Basically, many experts who were confident in their strength would do this when faced with a suitable opponent. Abdaluo did the same when he fought for the first time. Because it was difficult to find an opponent, he enjoyed every battle with an expert. The most obvious evidence was the strange blade technique that his opponent had used. It was a powerful blade technique that could injure him, a berserker who had practiced the ancient techniques. His opponent could have used it right from the start, but he did not. It was only when his opponent realized that his strength could no longer improve that he began to use a heavy blow. Before that, he had maintained a state of being evenly matched with his opponent to fight against him. If the other party could do this, It meant that the other party's limit was higher and stronger than his. Abdaluo's eyes lit up. All this time, he had been digging deep into Yu Yao's potential. If not for this, with his foundation, he would have been promoted to Rizhao long ago. He could feel that he still had potential that had not been dug out. But because there was no suitable opponent, he could not do as he wished. However, the appearance of the human tribe's weapon cultivator had given him a glimmer of hope. If the human tribe's weapon cultivator could be so strong, why couldn't he? A sound came from the side. It was Gu Sheng who had fallen onto the bed. His old injuries had yet to heal, and now there were new ones. Gu Sheng felt very tired. Most importantly, he could already feel that there was a strange power entangling around his wounds, hindering his recovery. Countless cultivators were shaken in the Yu Yao battlefield. There was no other reason. Gu Sheng and Abd Luo's era of dominating the Yu Yao ranking had come to an end. Ever since these two fellows came to the Azura battlefield, only the two of them had taken turns to occupy the top spot. The others simply didn't have the qualifications. Until today, he had been replaced by a human weapon cultivator of unknown origin. This person first fought Abd Luo. After a fierce battle, Abd Luo was no match for him and voluntarily admitted defeat. After that, he immediately fought Gu Sheng. His victory against Gu Sheng was a clean one. The spectating cultivators could all see that Gu Sheng seemed to be heavily injured, so he was unable to display much of his strength. That human weapon cultivator could defeat Abd Luo in his peak condition. So naturally, defeating the heavily injured Gu Sheng would be a piece of cake. A new era had arrived. Countless people wanted to know the identity and origin of the new weapon cultivator. Unfortunately, because Lu Yi had not been in the Azura battlefield for long, he had not interacted with many people in depth, so the information he could gather was pitifully little. At the same time, in the cave residence, Lu Yi rested for a moment before receiving a message from Walnut. Walnut wanted to meet him at the plaza of the treasury. Lu Yi was instantly filled with anticipation. After fighting in the battlefield for so long, it was finally time to split the spoils. He took out the Azura token and appeared in the treasury with a thought. Just as he steadied himself, he heard a familiar voice from the side. "Over here." Lu Yi turned his head and saw Walnut waving at him while jumping up and down. Beside her stood a dignified woman. He had seen this woman before. Every time Walnut entered the battlefield, this woman was always with her. So their relationship must be quite extraordinary. Lu Yi stepped forward and nodded at Walnut, then looked at the woman. Walnut introduced her. "This is my master." Lu Yi's heart trembled. Walnut had Yu Yao's cultivation, so her master must be Rizhao. The woman smiled. "My name is Nan Lian." Lu Yi bowed. "Greetings, fellow Taoist." Nan Lian smiled. "You're quite good." She had been in the battlefield for so many years, but she had never seen someone so pleasing to the eye. Thanks to Lu Yi, she was now quite wealthy. Of course, this was only secondary. The main reason was that during the process of betting with Lu Yi, she had experienced the joy of squandering money like it was dirt. If she won, her net worth would skyrocket, but if she lost, everything would come to an end. This was extremely helpful in tempering her mental state. Walnut excitedly said, "Fellow Taoist, take a guess. According to the Azura contract, how many Azura seals will you get this time?" Lu Yi could tell from her expression that she had gained quite a bit, so she casually said, 1,000,000. Walnut smiled and raised 3 slender fingers. More than 3,670,000. This was also because she had too little starting capital, and not enough people had bet on the last battle. Otherwise, she would have won even more. Looking at all of Lu Yi's fights, the one she won the most was undoubtedly the fight between Lu Yi and Abdullah. In that fight, apart from a few strange people who placed their bets on Lu Yi, only the master and disciple pair had placed their bets on Abdullah. After all, who would have thought that a never-before-seen human cultivator could beat Abdullah to the point of admitting defeat? Lu Yi's share of the Azura seals was 3,670,000, which meant that her overall profit would be double this number. After all, they had agreed to split it 50-50. Of course, Azura seals couldn't be directly traded, so Lu Yi could only obtain the rights to these Azura seals. What does fellow Taoists want to buy? I'll go buy it for you right now. Walnut asked. Help me exchange for some treasures that can increase the quality of my magic source, Lu Yi said. Walnut understood. This kind of treasure was something that all cultivators above Yu Yao needed, so Lu Ye's request was normal. She nodded and said, Then fellow Taoist, please wait here for a moment. After saying this, the two of them disappeared. Lu Yi quietly waited on the side. Not long after, Walnut and her master reappeared. She handed a storage ring to Lu Yi. I casually exchanged for some things. Fellow Taoist, please take a look. No need. Lu Yi put away the storage ring. With the Azura contract, Walnut couldn't do anything unless she didn't want to live anymore. As Walnut spoke, she took out another item and handed it to Lu Yi. This is a gift from my master. Lu Yi looked at it and saw that it was a large piece of green spirit moon essence. He had seen this thing in the treasury before, and vaguely remembered that its price was 380,000 Azura seals. The piece in front of him was larger than the one he had seen before, so he roughly estimated that it was worth at least 500,000 Azura seals. Lu Yi hesitated for a moment before accepting it. Then many thanks. Although there was a saying that one should not receive a reward for nothing, Nan Lian had always bet with her disciple on Lu Yi. The amount of Azura seals she earned was much more than her disciple. So what was the big deal about giving him a piece of green spirit moon essence? Lu Yi knew this, so he didn't refuse. After all, he had a huge need for this kind of treasure. Now that he had one more piece, he might be able to save a lot of trouble in the future. Nan Lian smiled gently. No need. Thanks to you, I'm very rich now. She didn't hide anything and spoke the truth. Does fellow Taoist have time? Walnut asked from the side. What's wrong? Lu Yi looked at her. Walnut giggled. If fellow Taoist has time, I'd like to invite you for a drink. It was rare to meet a character like Lu Yi. Her honored master had also told her to interact with him as much as possible. Perhaps one day she would need his help. Lu Yi thought for a moment and said, I used up a lot of energy in the battle just now. Of course, he wasn't interested in drinking. Moreover, it was two women he wasn't familiar with. Wouldn't it be awkward if he didn't have anything to say? Walnut understood. Then next time, when fellow Taoist has time, just call me. Lu Yi didn't refuse. Walnut and her disciple bid farewell and left. But before they left, Nan Lian suddenly thought of something and turned to Lu Yi. All right, if you have nothing to do, you can go to the bounty hall and take a look. Maybe you'll gain something. But if you really want to go, I advise you to change your appearance. Otherwise you'll be hated by others. Bounty Hall. Of course Lu Yi knew this place. This was the place where the cultivators of the Azura field issued all kinds of bounty missions. The reward for a mission was Azura seals, but cultivators couldn't set the price themselves. The Azura field determined the reward based on the difficulty of the mission. This was undoubtedly to prevent cultivators from transferring Azura seals through this method. After all, if a cultivator could set the price themselves, they could issue a very simple mission and set a very high reward for their own people to accept. Why did Nan Lian want him to go to the bounty hall? Moreover, she wanted him to change his appearance. However, Lu Yi could feel that she didn't have any ill intentions towards him. In fact, she was full of goodwill and appreciation, because he helped her win a lot of Azura seals. After thinking about it, Lu Yi decided to take a look at the bounty hall. In any case, he had nothing to do at the moment. As for refining the treasures that could increase the quality of his source of magic power, he had the innate skill tree, so it wasn't difficult at all. He wasn't in a hurry to go to the bounty hall. Instead, he returned to his cave. Since Nan Lian wanted him to change his appearance, he would obediently do as she said. This was something he was very familiar with. End of chapter. Chapter 1914. With the support of the Thousand Faces spirit inscriptions, Lu Ye's appearance changed greatly. Even his body became shorter, turning him into a stocky man with a long beard. With the activation of the pseudo-spirit inscriptions, his magic power fluctuations were concealed to the level of a mid-stage moon jade realm cultivator. He then put away the mountain plate saber, and a standard body cultivator was born. Only then did he take out the Azura token. With a thought, he arrived at the bounty hall. This was his first time here. When he looked up, he saw a huge dome hanging above his head. When he looked around, he couldn't see the end of the bounty hall. This was clearly a huge sealed space, and he didn't know where it was located in the heavenly Azura realm. There were many cultivators shuttling back and forth, and it was very lively. Under Luya's observation, the entire bounty hall was divided into regions. Each region had a number arranged in order of A, B, C, and D. In these regions, there were small hidden rooms, and outside the rooms, there were also numbers. Many of these small rooms had cultivators going in and out. Guiyi had told Luyi about this before. So Luyi naturally knew that those small rooms were for cultivators to discuss the details of their missions. If there were missions to be issued, there would naturally be missions to be accepted. Everyone would agree on which small room to meet and discuss in detail. He looked around, found a corner, and stood there. Only then did he immerse himself in checking his Azura token. The Azura token had a very comprehensive function in the Azura realm. Cultivators couldn't do without this special token in all aspects. Inside the bounty hall, cultivators could use the Azura token to investigate all kinds of bounty missions. Luyi activated his magic power and immersed his mind. A translucent light screen appeared in his vision. The light screen seemed to be floating in front of him, and there was a list of information on it. This was undoubtedly a bounty mission. Luyi took a closer look and found that the first mission was related to the Azura field. Provide any concrete information about the Azura realm's location, and the reward is 80 million Azura seals. Luyi raised his eyebrows. There was no doubt that this bounty had been issued by Rizhao. After all, 80 million Azura seals wasn't something that just anyone could take out. Only Rizhao had the capital to do so. Before he came, he knew that many experts were interested in the Azura realm. Since ancient times, countless people had been looking for this treasure, but they had never found any concrete clues. Everyone knew that the Azura realm was hidden in the Azura realm, but the key was that they couldn't find it. This was because as long as anyone entered the Azura field's range, they would directly appear in the heavenly Azura realm. After leaving the heavenly Azura realm, they would enter the training scene again. No one knew what the real Azura star field was like. This mission had probably been issued for a long time, but no one could swallow it even though 80 million Azura seals was a lot. Luyi looked further. The reward for killing Zhao Kong was 58,560,000 Azura seals. For killing Hu Yingying, the reward was 42 million Azura seals. The reward for killing Ma Bin was 56,900,000 Azura seals. Luyi looked further and saw that all the bounties above 10 million were required to kill a cultivator. He even saw Bru and Gu Sheng's names among the bounties. The two of them had accumulated a bounty of almost 10 million. He wondered what they had done to make the world angry and resentful. How was this a bounty list? This was a hunting list. However, Luya's gaze fell on the third name, Ma Bin. Was this Ma Bin the Ma Bin he knew? Or was it just the same name? The name Ma Bin wasn't rare, and there were many people in the human race. The one who could be in this position was undoubtedly Rizhao, and a very powerful one at that. Luyi faintly felt that this Ma Bin might be the previous 9 prefecture senior he had met once. Even so, he couldn't help much. The confrontation between Rizhao and Rizhao wasn't something he could get involved in now. It seemed that after Ma Bin killed Rizhao in the 10,000 Elephant Sea, he came to the Azura realm. Otherwise, why would there be a bounty for him here? He now had some understanding of the previous 9 prefectures. He didn't know why Ma Bin killed Rizhao in the 10,000 Elephant Sea, but now he had some insight. Collecting his thoughts, Luyi continued to look. After the 10 million bounties, there was a huge gap. After that, there was no need to kill a cultivator. It was just some ordinary bounty missions, so there wasn't any accumulated bounties. There were many types of missions. Some were to ask someone to refine medicine, some were to find someone to explore a training scene, and some were to find lost friends and family. Luyi was puzzled. Why did Nan Lian ask him to come to the bounty hall? These missions didn't seem to have anything to do with him. However, as he looked, he suddenly saw a mission and his eyes lit up. A strange poison that devours blood and vitality. The source of the poison is unknown. The poisoned person's blood and vitality will deteriorate. They can only use high-quality blood and vitality pills to prolong their life. The reward is 300,000 Azura seals. This mission was undoubtedly suitable for him. Under the powerful burning power of the talent tree, no matter what kind of strange poison it was, it would be dealt with. 300,000 Azura seals was already a lot. He only got a little more than 100,000 from his previous training. If he took this mission, it would be equivalent to 2 training sessions. Coming here was the right choice. There was a pleasant surprise. However, after thinking about it, Lu Yi felt that something was wrong. Nan Lian asked him to come here, and specifically told him to change his appearance. She definitely didn't want him to take this mission. She couldn't have known that he had the talent tree, and could cure poisons. Therefore, this was just an unexpected gain. Nan Lian must have another reason for telling him this. However, it had to be said that there were actually quite a few missions to help people detoxify. A strange poison that could render a cultivator helpless was obviously not that easy to deal with. Perhaps Rizhao had the ability to do so, but if he really had the ability, why would he care about the bounty? Lu Yi secretly remembered these missions, and prepared to take them when he returned. After looking for a long time, Lu Yi finally understood why Nan Lian had asked him to come here. It was because there was a large row of missions on the bounty board that were almost exactly the same. The description of the mission was, during the Lunar Jade ranking battle, you were injured by someone with a blade. The injury is strange and difficult to heal. It is suspected that you are poisoned. The reward is 30,000 Azura seals. Lu Yi immediately knew what was going on. Wasn't he the one who had been injured by someone with a blade during the Lunar Jade ranking battle? Those who had been injured by him all had the power of Feng lingering around their wounds. It was normal for them to mistakenly think that they were poisoned. The power of Feng was too strange. If Lu Yi wasn't the owner of the Feng blade, he probably wouldn't have thought that there was such a disgusting power in this world. In fact, the power of Feng was not unsolvable. If one's cultivation was high enough, they could forcibly suppress and remove it. For example, Tianyin had asked Rizhao from his clan for help. However, it was very difficult for Rizhao to do so. It required time and energy, and the simplest way was to ignore it. The power of Feng lasted for a certain period of time. Lu Yi didn't know how long it lasted, but he was sure that it wouldn't be too long. When the time was up, it would naturally disappear. But who dared to ignore it? Anyone with such injuries and constant bleeding would be terrified. Naturally, it was better to deal with it as soon as possible and feel at ease. Nan Lian must have inadvertently seen or heard about these missions. That was why she told Lu Yi to come to the bounty hall. She felt that since these people's injuries were caused by Lu Ye's poison, there must be a corresponding way to detoxify it. As for changing their appearance, that was for sure. Who would poison someone and specially accept a bounty mission to detoxify someone? If they really did that, they would be inviting jealousy and hatred. But a bounty of 30,000 Azura seals, who were they looking down on? Lu Yi was indignant, but he also knew that the amount of the bounty was not determined by the will of the cultivator. This was the amount set by the Azura arena. So what if it was 30,000? Fortunately, there were many missions. Lu Yi made a rough calculation. He had fought in more than 200 battles, which meant that more than 200 cultivators had been injured by him. There were only a little more than 100 missions here. Obviously, not everyone had come here to post missions. But it didn't matter. As long as the news of him completing this mission spread, there should be more missions. 30,000 for one mission was not much. But what about 100 or 200? This was the rhythm of becoming rich. Lu Ye's mind became active. He hadn't even been in the Azura arena for a month, but he had already received 3 to 4 million Azura seals from Walnut. He could also earn a few million Azura seals from his side. If he could do this repeatedly, wouldn't he become rich quickly? Maybe he could even save up enough Azura seals to exchange for the Azura arena's treasures. But he also knew that this was just a thought, because even if he left the Azura arena, He would not start from the beginning the next time he came in. The Azura Arena would record his ranking on the Yu Yao ranking and his previous performances. The next time he came in, they would arrange a suitable ranking for him. Therefore, he could only start from the beginning once, unless he advanced to the Sunshine Realm. With a thought, Lu Yi accepted a bounty mission through the Azura token. Soon the Azura token vibrated. Lu Yi checked it, and found that it was a cultivator he had never contacted or interacted with. This was undoubtedly the Azura Arena's rules. After accepting a mission, Lu Yi could communicate with the cultivator, who issued the mission for a short period of time. There was no need to exchange imprints. The other party was undoubtedly anxious because his injuries had not healed. In this state, he could not participate in the training. He did not even know if he would die from blood loss one day. Lu Yi looked left and right, and gave the other party a number. Then, he put away the Azura token and walked over. There was a small, secluded room with the door wide open. It was no doubt empty, and could be used for a while. End of chapter. Chapter 1915. In a small room in the Bounty Hall, Lu Yi, who had changed his appearance, sat upright and waited quietly. In the corner of the room, there was another figure. It was his precious blood clone. At this moment, the clone's position was concealed by a formation. Even if someone came in, they wouldn't be able to notice the abnormality if their eyesight wasn't good enough. The mountain coiling blade was placed across the clone's knee. The power of brightness was very simple to deal with. He only needed to use the mountain coiling blade, which was transformed from the Feng blade. However, since Lu Yi had changed his appearance, he naturally couldn't show his true body, so he came up with this method. After waiting for a moment, a figure hurriedly rushed in, wrapped in the smell of blood. "Greetings, fellow Taoist." The person cupped his fists and bowed. Lu Yi looked up and found that the newcomer was indeed familiar. It should be an opponent that he had injured in a battle. As for his name, he really didn't know. There had been too many cultivators challenging him recently. Apart from a few who were strong enough, how could he remember the names of others? "Sit." Lu Yi gestured with his hand. The cultivator immediately sat in front of Lu Yi and said, "Fellow Taoist, my injuries were caused by the New Moon Jade Roll champion. It seems like I was poisoned, but it doesn't seem like it." He obviously wanted to explain his injuries in detail to Lu Yi. Lu Yi raised his hand and stopped him. "I understand the situation. Give me your hand." The cultivator quickly stretched out his hand. Lu Yi reached out and grabbed it. Then he urged his magic power and instructed, "Relax your mind. Don't resist." The other party didn't suspect anything. No one dared to act recklessly in this place, so he wasn't worried that Lu Yi would harm him. He immediately relaxed his mind and allowed Lu Ye's magic power to enter his body. After a moment, he felt Lu Ye's magic power circulating in his body, but his injuries showed no signs of improvement. He couldn't help but ask, "Fellow Taoist, can you do it?" Logically speaking, since the other party had accepted the mission, they must be confident in completing it. If they failed to complete the mission after accepting it, there would be a corresponding punishment. The amount of Azura seals the bounty was worth would be deducted from the other party. The injuries on his body were extremely strange, and he could not suppress them with his cultivation. He even tried to cut off his injured flesh, but it was to no avail. Even if he cut off his injured flesh, there was still that strange power lingering on the new wounds. Lu Yi looked up at him, then gently tapped his wrist with her finger. "Break." As soon as he finished speaking, the cultivator's body shook, because he clearly felt that the strange power in his wound had completely dissipated at this moment, and his entire body suddenly became much more relaxed. His eyes couldn't help but widen greatly, and he moved his muscles and bones to check his injuries. When he discovered that his injuries had already begun to heal, he was instantly overjoyed and praised. "Fellow Taoist is really amazing." He didn't understand how Lu Yi did it, but it was a fact that his problem had been solved. Those 30,000 Azura seals were well spent. Even his attitude towards Lu Yi changed. He cupped his fists and said, "Thank you, fellow Taoist. May I ask for your name?" A person with such strange abilities was undoubtedly worth making friends with. Who knew if he would encounter similar troubles in the future? If he could establish a relationship with him, he wouldn't have to be afraid of anything in the future. Lu Yi waved his hand in an unfathomable manner and didn't say anything. When the cultivator saw this, he knew what Lu Yi meant. Although it was a pity, he still thanked him and took his leave. After he left, Lu Yi began to check his Azura command and found that there were indeed 30,000 Azura seals in it. This money was really easy to earn. He immediately accepted another bounty and waited quietly. Time passed, and one after another, the cultivators who had fought with him in the battle arena came in and out. Lu Yi first dealt with one bounty before accepting another. But after a while, he found that this was too inefficient, so he simply accepted all the bounty missions at once. Then, he sent a message to the cultivators who issued the bounties, telling them to come to the small room here. As a result, an extremely strange phenomenon appeared in the bounty hall. Outside a small room, many cultivators lined up and slowly walked forward. Some of the cultivators who didn't know what was going on went to inquire, and soon understood the whole story. There were more than 100 bounty missions, and it took Lu Yi almost a day to deal with them. It wouldn't take too long to solve the problem, but he had to put on an act to make others feel that the 30,000 Azura seals were worth it. After dealing with the first batch of bounties, Lu Yi looked at the bounty board again and found that there were a few more similar bounties. Obviously, these people found out that someone could cure the strange saber wound, so they all used their Azura seals to issue missions. Lu Yi didn't refuse any of them and accepted them all. After dealing with this batch, there were a few more bounties on the bounty board. Lu Yi busied himself non-stop, and the number of Azura seals increased at an impressive rate. His mood gradually became better. Finally, when the number of Azura seals exceeded 6 million, there were no more similar missions on the bounty board. The number was a bit off, but it was more or less the same. After all, not everyone needed him to cure the power of brightness. Some people didn't know about this, so they naturally didn't issue any missions, and some people could ask their elders for help. Just as Lu Yi was about to accept the mission to cure the poison, the light at the door suddenly dimmed, and then someone stepped in. It wasn't one person, but two people. One of them was extremely tall and burly, and he walked in front, blocking the figure of the second person. Lu Yi looked up and blinked his eyes. The two people who had come were none other than Abro and Gusheng. When he didn't see them before, Lu Yi thought that the two of them had asked their elders for help to solve the power of brightness. Whether it was the barbarian race or the yellow dragon realm, there must be a Rizhao resident in the Azura field. Who would have thought that they didn't, and they didn't issue any bounty missions, but directly came to find him. After entering the small room, Abro looked at Lu Yi condescendingly with a look of amazement. Gusheng also flashed out from behind him, but he didn't look at Lu Yi. Instead, he looked in the direction of the precious blood avatar. Lu Yi raised his eyebrows. This Gusheng's perception was very strong. He had already concealed the precious blood avatar with an array, so basically no one who came in before found it. However, Gusheng saw it immediately, which showed how strong his perception was. Huh! Abro suddenly made a sound of surprise and looked at Lu Yi more carefully, as if he wanted to see through his disguise. Hearing his voice, Gusheng finally turned his head with a serious expression. Lu Yi frowned. He didn't know what these two guys wanted to do. After a long while, Abro tilted his head slightly and whispered to Gusheng, "Are you mistaken?" "There can't be a mistake," Gusheng whispered back. "If you're not mistaken, then this is too flawless. Did you see anything?" "I didn't see anything." "Trash," Abro reprimanded mercilessly. "You saw it." "I didn't either." Lu Yi frowned and said, "Fellow Taoists, what's the matter?" Did these two really think that he couldn't hear them whispering like this? Abro grinned and sat directly in front of Lu Yi. He put his hands on his knees and looked at him with a burning gaze. "Hello, fellow Taoist. We meet again." Lu Yi's expression didn't change. "What do you mean?" Abro chuckled. "Fellow Taoist, you know what I mean. Why do you have to pretend?" Lu Yi frowned and stared at Abro. He didn't know if the other party had really seen through him. It didn't make sense. His disguise with the help of spirit tattoos couldn't be seen through so easily, but Abro directly called him fellow Taoist Lu. This obviously meant that he knew something. Gusheng also sat down and looked at Lu Yi. Although the soldier tribe is rare, it's not unknown. I once saw a description of the strange power of the soldier tribe in an ancient book of this world. It's almost exactly the same as the injuries on your body. It's also recorded that the strange power of the soldier tribe can only be forcibly suppressed by a powerful force. When the time comes, the power of the soldier tribe will disappear, or rely on the soldier tribe themselves to deal with it easily. Lu Yi suddenly understood. So this was the problem. Gusheng was born in the Yellow Dragon realm, a top realm like the Yellow Dragon realm. Naturally, there were many records of all kinds of secrets. It wasn't surprising that he had seen some records of the soldier tribe. If that was all, it would be fine. The key point was that Lu Yi had been helping those injured cultivators solve their problems for the past 2 days. Gusheng naturally made the connection. As for his current disguise, in this vast cultivation world, there were many ways to disguise oneself. If Gusheng had already identified him, then even the most perfect disguise would be meaningless. However, I don't know what you two fellow Taoists are talking about. Lu Yi couldn't admit his identity. He didn't know what kind of temperament these two had. Moreover, he had just beaten them up in the arena. Who knew if they would hold a grudge against him? If they were to leak out what had happened here, they would be hated by others. Abro said, "Fellow Taoist, we have no ill intentions towards you. We just want to." Before he could finish, he was interrupted by Gusheng. "Then we've made a mistake," he continued. "I heard that fellow Taoists can heal our injuries." "Yes." Lu Yi nodded. "Please post the bounties first." Abro and Gusheng did what they wanted. After a short while, Lu Yi saw that there were 2 more bounties of 30,000 Azura seals on the bounty list. He accepted the bounties and helped them solve their problems. Gusheng immediately relaxed. His body was heavily injured and affected by the power of Fong. The pressure he endured was much more severe than Abro's. "Fellow Taoist, can you exchange your Azura token imprint?" Gusheng asked. "If so, if there are similar injuries in the future, we can directly contact fellow Taoist." Many people had made this request before, but Lu Yi had never agreed to it. However, after thinking about it, he took out his Azura token. End of chapter. Chapter 1916. Lu Yi was willing to exchange Shura tokens with Abro and Gusheng not because of their strength, but because he had a vague feeling that they were looking for him for something. However, since he had denied his identity, they could not bring it up. Lu Yi did not know why they were looking for him, but there was no harm in listening. Besides, Lu Yi had his own plans. Based on his previous fight with Abro, this guy had condensed the flower of the body. Coupled with the unique environment of the ancient barbarian world, it was very likely that he knew the secret of the 3 flowers. In order to condense the flower of qi, one needed to have a perfect source. This was only Lu Ye's own speculation. However, if he could get some concrete information from Abro, it would undoubtedly be of great help to him. Even if Abro did not come looking for him this time, he was prepared to find an opportunity to interact with Abro. Therefore, Gusheng's suggestion of exchanging tokens was exactly what he wanted. Of course, he would not refuse. After Abro and Gusheng left, Lu Yi pondered for a moment before accepting the bounty mission to cure the poison. After waiting for a while, a sallow and emaciated person with a weak vitality walked in. Lu Yi could tell at a glance that this person's condition was not good, because the vitality in his body was too weak. Lu Yi did not know what his original cultivation was, but even if he still had some cultivation left, he would not be able to display much strength with his current vitality. According to the bounty mission, this person was afflicted with a strange poison that could devour vitality. The source was unknown, and so far, no one had been able to cure it. In this huge Shura field, there must be a lot of medical cultivators. Since this person could afford to pay 300,000 Shura seals, he must have consulted many medical cultivators. However, he still looked like neither a human nor a ghost. It was obvious that the medical cultivators he had consulted were helpless. The person sat down and coughed a few times like an ordinary person who was terminally ill. His dim eyes were filled with anticipation as he looked at Lu Yi. His bounty mission had been on the bounty list for several years, but no one had accepted it. He had already resigned himself to his fate, but who knew that he would be pleasantly surprised? Since the person who accepted the mission had the confidence to accept it, he must be confident in his own abilities. However, after sizing him up, the person's expression became strange. He had thought that the person who accepted the mission was a medical cultivator. But now, no matter how he looked at it, the stocky man sitting opposite him did not seem like a medical cultivator. "Fellow Taoist," he panted. "I've been afflicted with this strange poison for many years. It's constantly devouring my vitality. Stretch out your hand," Lu Yi instructed. The man immediately stretched out his hand. While Lu Yi examined it, he continued to describe his situation, so that Lu Yi could make a more direct judgment. Lu Yi didn't listen at all. If he was a real medical cultivator, this information would undoubtedly be very important, but he wasn't. After checking for a while, he said, "It might be a little painful. Please bear with it." The man nodded. "I can endure it." After being tormented by the strange poison for so many years, what kind of suffering had he not endured? His heart was already as firm as a rock. Lu Yi immediately activated the power of her talent tree. Invisible roots extended from her palm and probed into the body of the cultivator in front of her. Then, they gently burned away the strange poison in his body. In the past, he was able to burn down the power of the curse passed down in the bloodline of the mermaid clan with the help of the talent tree. What was this Su Qi poison to him now? However, this person's physical condition was really too poor, so Lu Yi had to be careful. Otherwise, this person might suddenly die. This cultivator's heart was indeed tough enough. The process of burning the talent tree was accompanied by great pain, but he didn't make a sound. He just clenched his teeth tightly, and sweat poured out all over his body. As time passed, his eyes gradually became brighter. This was because he could feel that the strange poison that had troubled him for so many years was really slowly disappearing. It was as if there was a flowing flame in his body. Wherever the flame burned, there would be new life. Burning away such a strange poison was much easier than helping the mermaid clan to burn away the curse in their bloodline. Even so, Lu Yi still took half a day to complete the task. After he withdrew his hand, the cultivator closed his eyes and focused, carefully sensing the situation in his body. He was still very weak, because he had been troubled by the strange poison for so many years. However, his qi and blood were no longer disappearing. Under the urging of his magic power, it flowed smoothly without any signs of blockage. This undoubtedly meant that as long as he could get enough rest, he would be able to recover sooner or later. Opening his eyes, he was overjoyed and bowed to Lu Yi. "Thank you, fellow Taoist, for saving me from this disaster. I will remember this kindness forever." Lu Yi waved his hand. "I took your money and helped you solve your problem." This person also wanted to exchange Azura tokens with Lu Yi, looking as if he wanted to make friends with him. Naturally, Lu Yi declined. He could only regretfully leave and prepare to recuperate. After this person left, Lu Yi checked the bounty list and received a similar mission. Another day later, Lu Yi left the bounty hall. There were no more missions suitable for him on the bounty list, so there was no point in staying any longer. Returning to his cultivation dwelling, Lu Yi checked his Azura tokens and found that the number of Azura tokens he had accumulated had exceeded 7 million. He was in a good mood and decided to visit the bounty hall more often in the future. Who knows, he might be able to find a suitable and simple mission. 7 million Azura seals. According to the price of treasures in the Azura field, even the white moon crystals he had refined before could be exchanged for 6 of them. However, Lu Yi didn't immediately exchange for them. Instead, he took out a storage ring and took out the items inside. These were all treasures that could increase the quality of his source that Walnut had given him. Adding the blue moon spirit jade that Nan Lian had given him, he had a total value of 4 million Azura seals. If converted to spirit jades, it wouldn't be worth much. 40 million spirit jades wasn't a large number to Lu Yi, but these were all good things that couldn't be bought with spirit jades. In the Azura field, there were many treasures. As long as one had enough Azura seals, they could be exchanged for anything. Lu Yi increasingly felt that his decision to come to the Azura field was the right one. Otherwise, if he just waited in the 10,000 Elephant Sea, how could there be such a good thing? He immediately refined the treasures in front of him one by one. Activating the power of the talent tree, refining these treasures was simple and easy. He only needed to consume some fuel reserves. Half a day later, Lu Yi felt a clear change in his source. He immediately took out a piece of spirit jade. This time, he didn't activate the power of the talent tree, but refined it himself. This was the normal cultivation method of all cultivators. He could feel strands of energy overflowing from the spirit jade and seeping into his body. Under the circulation of his source, the spirit energy was converted into magic power and stored in his body. Unfortunately, he rarely used this kind of normal cultivation method in the past. He didn't have an accurate comparison, so he didn't know how much the quality of his source had improved. If he wanted an accurate comparison, he would have to return to the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Only by going deep into the sea would he be able to make a clear judgment. However, one thing was certain. Although the quality of his source had improved, it was far from the limit. There was still a lot of room for improvement. Looking at the 7 million Azura seals in the Azura command, Lu Yi pondered for a moment and decided to keep them for now. In any case, refining those treasures was very easy. He could exchange for them whenever he needed them. Keeping the Azura seals could be used in case he needed them. This time he could easily earn Azura seals. In the future it wouldn't be so easy. He would have to slowly accumulate experience after experience. Walking out of the cave, Lu Yi flew up. Several days had passed since his last experience. Now that the dust had settled on the Yu Yao rankings, Lu Yi naturally had to enter the next experience. In the Azura field, experience wasn't just for tempering oneself. It also allowed one to earn Azura seals and exchange them for resources. This was also the reason why many cultivators were unwilling to leave for many years. Even a place like the 10,000 Elephant Sea, where many galaxies gathered, wasn't as attractive as the Azura field. Lu Yi's expression was calm as he gradually ascended. The last experience hadn't been too difficult, but he didn't know how it would be this time. Logically speaking, every experience that a cultivator went through had a risk of dying. Even someone as strong as Gu Sheng had been seriously injured in the last experience. However, Lu Yi felt that there shouldn't be anything that could threaten him in the Yu Yao realm. Thus, he didn't know what kind of experience the Azura field would arrange for him. This kind of thing couldn't be predicted in advance. He could only be vigilant. When he reached a certain height, the same experience as last time appeared again. The scenery around him suddenly changed, and he was plunged into darkness. Suddenly, a beam of light appeared in the darkness, faintly revealing a blurry image. Lu Yi focused his attention on the scene in front of him. With his previous experience, he naturally knew that everything he saw and heard now would become the background of the next experience, so he naturally didn't act carelessly. As he waited, the blurry image suddenly twisted and changed. Lu Yi frowned, not knowing what was going on. Just as he was puzzled, a faint sound rang in his ears. However, this sound seemed to be affected by some kind of power, becoming indistinct and intermittent. The blurry image before him distorted even more frequently. Lu Yi's eyes widened, but he still couldn't see what it was. This Lu Yi was at a loss. For a moment, an absurd thought appeared in his mind. Was there a problem with the Azura field? He couldn't be blamed for thinking this. The scene before him was just too strange. He couldn't see the image, and he couldn't hear the sound. This didn't make sense. Suddenly, his body fell into darkness once more, and even the intermittent and obscure sounds by his ears disappeared. Lu Yi was completely enveloped in darkness, as if he had been thrown into a bottomless black hole. This kind of environment inexplicably made him feel anxious and oppressed. "Is anyone there?" he shouted. However, he couldn't hear his own voice. He tried to move, but his legs couldn't move. This was bad. This Azura field. Perhaps there really was a problem. Otherwise, this situation wouldn't have happened. End of chapter. Chapter 1917. Although Lu Yi hadn't been in the Azura field for long, and had only experienced one trial before, he could still keenly sense that something was wrong with the current situation. What he was experiencing now was completely different from the first time he entered the trial scene. Lu Yi's first thought was that there was something wrong with the Azura field, but then he thought about it. The Azura field was a starry sky treasure, and had been maintained for tens of thousands of years before he came here. How could it be so easy for something to go wrong? Moreover, the timing was so coincidental. But if that wasn't the case, then how could the current situation be explained? As his thoughts changed, the thick darkness suddenly faded, and Lu Yi suddenly found that he could feel his own existence. There was a faint light in front of him from a crack. He blinked and raised his hand to push forward. With a soft creak, light shone in front of him. He took a few steps forward, and in an instant, the fragrance of birds and flowers rushed to his face. He turned his head to look around, and found that this should be some kind of deep mountain forest. There were thick trees all around him with fluffy canopies like open umbrellas. Not far in front of him was a sparkling lake, and the fragrance of grass mixed with the soil lingered at the tip of his nose. He turned his head to look behind him, and found that he had walked out of a straw hut. The small straw hut in the middle of the mountain had a sense of being hidden in the wilderness. It seemed that he had unknowingly entered the trial scene, but why didn't he get any information about this scene? Thinking back to his strange experience just now, Lu Yi felt that something was not right. After a moment of thought, he raised his hand and took out the Azura command. He immersed his mind into it, but there was no feedback. What did this mean? Why did the Azura arena throw him into such an obscure place? Then what was the mission of his training this time? Asterisk rumble. Asterisk. Just as Lu Yi was pondering, a soft sound suddenly came from his feet. He looked down and saw something the size of a baby's fist rolling on the ground. This thing looked extremely familiar. Lu Yi's heart skipped a beat. Knowing that this was bad, he quickly raised his foot and stepped on it. He frowned and his whole body froze in place. His expression was tangled, and he looked like he had a deep grudge. After a long while he sighed. He knew that if it was a blessing, it wouldn't be a disaster. If it was a disaster, it couldn't be avoided. Only then did he slowly move his foot away, and look down with narrowed eyes. A large unlucky character instantly appeared in his vision. How could it be the word unlucky? Lu Yi moved quickly, using the sole of his foot to cover up the character, but it was useless. The character turned into a dark beam of light that pierced through the sole of his foot and into his forehead. Lu Yi's heart sank, and he immediately had a bad feeling, as if his whole body was covered by a layer of invisible weight. He removed his foot, bent down, picked up the object on the ground, and threw it into the lake in front of him. It was a bad start. Without any information or clues, he had no idea what he was supposed to do during this training. That was one thing, but the dice of fate had even added bad luck to him. He clearly remembered that he had tied up the dice of fate and hung it at his waist. Moreover, the rope he had used was extremely tough, so it was impossible for it to break for no reason. But now it had broken. Could it be that he was really unlucky this time? In the treasure vault, he had personally witnessed a late-stage moon jade being killed by the power of the Azura field's rules. Thus, Lu Yi knew that the dice of fate was an extremely mysterious thing. He didn't plan on casually using it again, especially in such a situation. But now it had fallen down on its own. But thinking about it, was it better to be unlucky than to be unlucky? If the dice of fate really did turn out to be unlucky this time, Lu Yi didn't know what kind of danger he would encounter. He immersed his mind and inspected his talent tree. Sure enough, a gray fog rose up from the talent tree, burning away the power of the dice of fate. But with his previous experience, Lu Yi knew that this process would continue for several days. He secretly decided that he wouldn't go anywhere for the next few days. He would live here in seclusion to avoid any mishaps. Moreover, looking at the environment in which he had appeared, it seemed that he really was a secluded expert. Looking at the lake in front of him, Lu Yi sighed and jumped in. He had thrown away the dice of fate in a moment of anger. This thing was a supreme treasure, so how could he throw it away so casually? Diving deep into the water, he easily found the dice of fate and stuffed it into his clothes. But as soon as he emerged from the water, Lu Yi frowned. This was because two figures had appeared in front of his grass hut at some unknown time. One was tall, and the other was short. The tall one was like a bamboo pole, and the short one was like a round ball. Their appearances were indescribable. They didn't look like anything good. As expected, he was really unlucky. Even if he decided to live here in seclusion for a few days, he still wouldn't be able to find peace. At this time, these two uninvited guests were coldly sizing up Lu Yi. The tall one asked, "Boy, do you see an old guy with a child?" "No," Lu Yi decisively replied. The tall one seriously sized him up, as if trying to see if he was lying. But Lu Yi really didn't see any old guy with a child. His expression was honest and sincere. "Kill him." After saying this, the tall one took the lead and flew forward. He spread out his powerful divine sense, clearly searching for something. The short cultivator rushed toward Lu Yi. Magic power surged from his body. He was actually a moon jade intermediate stage cultivator. Lu Yi was helpless. He had already decided to live in seclusion for a few days and wait for the talent tree to resolve his bad luck. Why did they have to force him? This bad luck. Was it his bad luck? Or was it the bad luck of these two uninvited guests? He really couldn't say for sure. With a clang, a long saber was unsheathed. The tall cultivator, who had already flown a distance away, suddenly turned his head back. His eyes suddenly narrowed. He actually saw the scene of his companion's head flying high into the air, while the young man who had just appeared from the lake was nowhere to be seen. Suddenly, a sense of danger rose in his heart. The tall cultivator immediately looked to the side and saw a bright saber light. With a splashing sound, Lu Yi passed by him. Blood spurted out from his body, and his bamboo-like body was cut in half, falling into the lake. In the next instant, the lake's surface was dyed red. Standing above the lake, Lu Yi swung the mountain plate saber and sheathed it. At that moment, he suddenly turned his head and looked in a certain direction. There was a sound coming from that direction. It seemed to be the crying of an infant. He immediately rushed in that direction. In the blink of an eye, he arrived behind a large tree. Sure enough, he saw an infant in swaddling clothes. At that moment, the infant was being held in the arms of an old man. Blood flowed from the old man's body, and a huge wound on his chest and abdomen could be seen. His 5 internal organs had already been pulverized. His eyes were dim. If he wasn't strong enough, he would have already died from such injuries. Lu Yi immediately thought of the tall cultivator's question. He understood that those two people hadn't found this place by chance. They had most likely chased after the old man and the infant. Not only were the old man's injuries serious, but he also seemed to have been poisoned. This was because his face was black. Lu Yi couldn't help but think of the two cultivators from before. When they activated their magic power, they seemed to be surrounded by this aura. Needless to say, the old man was injured by those two Yao. Lu Ye's sudden appearance caused the old man's dim eyes to tremble. However, when he saw that Lu Yi wasn't one of the two cultivators chasing after him, his eyes became much brighter. He shakily lifted the crying infant and said with difficulty, "Fellow Taoist, go to the cloud radish, sacred ground." Lu Yi looked at him, and a thought flashed through his mind. This experience was different from the last time. He didn't obtain any useful information. However, at this moment, he encountered a dying man who had entrusted his child to him. Thinking about it, was sending this infant to the so-called cloud radish sacred ground his current mission? If it was under normal circumstances, Lu Yi wouldn't hesitate. However, with his current bad luck, Lu Yi didn't know whether he should agree or not. Without any time to think, the old man spat out a mouthful of blood mixed with pieces of his internal organs. Then, his head tilted to the side and he died on the spot. The infant in his arms fell straight to the ground. He was already crying loudly, but now he cried even more fiercely. Just as the infant was about to hit the ground, Lu Yi caught him with a single hand. When he looked at the old man again, He had already turned into specks of light and disappeared. This made Lu Yi understand that this old man was undoubtedly a shadow. The two Yu Yao he killed just now didn't seem to be shadows. He also didn't know where they came from. Holding the infant in his arms, Lu Ye's face was filled with worry. This experience in the Azura battlefield was really strange. Someone like him, who killed people like Scything Flax, actually had to escort an infant to the so-called Cloud Radish sacred ground. In comparison, Lu Yi felt that killing people was much more enjoyable. Sure enough, this trip didn't go well. Bad luck was everywhere. However, since this was a training mission, there was no reason to refuse. After all, it was related to obtaining the Azura seal. His plan to live in seclusion was ruined. The infant's crying wasn't loud. Instead, he seemed to be weak. Lu Yi released his divine sense, and quickly discovered that this was because the infant was too weak. Looking at the infant's appearance, he seemed to be less than a month old. What kind of background did he have to attract the pursuit of Tu Yu Yao? Then the first thing he needed to do was find something to eat for this child. Thinking of this, Lu Yi leapt up. He didn't know where the Cloud Radish sacred ground was, so he could only choose a random direction. Half a day later, in a small village at the foot of a mountain, Lu Yi stood at the door of a house. Next to him was a rough man squatting on the ground. From time to time, the man would glance at Lu Yi, his eyes filled with fear. Inside the house, a woman held an infant in her arms and gently patted him. Her eyes were filled with kindness, and the sound of sucking and swallowing came from the infant's mouth. Lu Yi felt that he wasn't too unlucky. It didn't take him much effort to find a woman who was breastfeeding. He handed the infant to her and asked for her help. The woman readily agreed. End of chapter. Chapter 1918. Asterisk rumble. Asterisk, there was the sound of muffled thunder, and lightning streaked across the sky like a twisting snake. The clouds were thick and heavy, giving off an extremely oppressive feeling. Lu Yi looked up at the sky, his eyes narrowing slightly. I wonder when this damned weather will end, the rough man muttered. The rough man squatting by the side muttered and spat to the side, as if venting the dissatisfaction in his heart. How long has this weather been going on? Lu Yi asked. It's been 2 months, the rough man replied cautiously. Although he was an ordinary person, he still knew about cultivation. Lu Yi had an extraordinary bearing, and he could tell at a glance that he was a successful cultivator. Naturally, the rough man looked up to him in awe. Lu Yi didn't say anything. In the rough man's opinion, this weather was nothing special. It was just a little bad. He only cared about whether the crops in his field could grow, and whether he could get next year's rations during the autumn harvest. However, what Lu Yi saw was naturally different. He could clearly feel the aftermath of a fierce battle in the sky. The abnormal weather was partly caused by nature, but more importantly, it was caused by this battle. This realm was being invaded. Lu Yi immediately came to a conclusion. Lu Yi wasn't too sure about the background of this realm, but based on the fact that he had met Yu Yao before, this realm was undoubtedly a large one. He just didn't know if there was sunshine. If there was no sunshine, he naturally wouldn't have too many misgivings. But if there was sunshine, then it was a different story. Thinking about the word bad luck on the dice of fate, Lu Yi guessed that there was a high possibility that there was sunshine in this realm. So he had to be careful. He didn't know what kind of force was invading this realm. Since the battle had lasted for 2 months, it meant that this realm still had the strength to resist. From the looks of it, the Cloudvine Sacred Land was a very important place. He hadn't received any information about this trial, so he could only rely on his own inquiries and guesses. Just as he was thinking this, Lu Yi suddenly frowned and turned to look in a certain direction. Then he flicked his finger, and a drop of treasured blood flew out. Under the stunned gaze of the rough man, it turned into a human figure identical to Lu Yi. However, the clothes on his body were blood red, as if they were cast in blood. Leaving the treasured blood clone to guard this place, Lu Ye's main body quickly left. He sensed 2 powerful auras approaching. What made him feel strange was that these 2 auras were vaguely familiar, as if he had sensed them somewhere before. Several dozen breaths later, several hundred li away, Lu Yi stood still and looked at the 2 figures, one tall and one short, with a look of surprise in his eyes. These two fellows were the two people he had killed in front of the thatched cottage. The shorter one had been decapitated by his saber, while the taller one had been sliced in half at the waist. With such injuries, not only would Yu Yao die, even Ri Zhao wouldn't be able to survive. Yet, not only had they not died, but they had also caught up to him. What was going on? Sensing the aura of these two people, they were indeed the two people he had met, and not someone else. At this moment, both of them glared gloomily at Lu Yi, their expressions filled with anger. Moreover, the two of them had used some kind of secret technique to link their auras together, clearly preparing to join forces against the enemy. "Fellow Taoist, you're really something," the tall one said. "We were careless just now," said the short one. "Now let's fight again," the tall one said again. "If you don't want to die, that's fine too," the short one said for the second time. "Hand over that infant, then fellow Taoist, you'll come under my great heavenly God. Only then will you be safe." These two people spoke one after another, and the connection between them was extremely natural. It was as if one person was speaking, and this made Lu Yi feel extremely strange. He frowned slightly. "Great heavenly God, what is that?" He vaguely guessed that the so-called Great Heavenly God should be the background of these two Yu Yao, but Lu Yi wasn't clear about the specifics. Perhaps it was a very powerful cultivator. "Impudent!" the tall one shouted harshly. "The Great Heavenly God is supreme, above all the races in the world. Don't be rude." "So, what exactly is the Great Heavenly God?" Normally, Lu Yi couldn't be bothered to speak too much nonsense with the enemy, but right now he had too little information, so he naturally wanted to find out more information. "Also, I clearly killed both of you, so why aren't you dead?" He asked the question in his heart. When a cultivator reached the constellation tier, the cultivation direction was the cultivation of essence. Thus, after reaching the constellation tier, a cultivator's chi and blood would have a qualitative improvement, and it wouldn't be impossible for them to recover from their injuries, regrow their severed limbs, and so on. However, Lu Yi had really never seen anyone still alive after being decapitated. This was too illogical. What puzzled him even more was that he actually didn't sense the existence of the power of Feng from these two people. In other words, they had used some kind of method to dissolve the power of Feng around their wounds. Were these two people really the two people that he had killed? There's no need to speak too much with him. This kind of ignorant person will never be able to experience the glory of the great heavenly God. "Kill him!" the tall one shouted harshly. The two of them activated their chi, blood, and magic power at the same time, and their aura instantly became comparable to that of Yu Yao's late stage. In the next instant, the two of them transformed into flowing lights, crisscrossing left and right, and like a pair of scissors, they cut toward Lu Ye's body. Lu Ye's expression was grave, and he unsheathed his Pan Mountain saber. His figure moved slightly, and two saber lights slashed out at almost the same time. There was a poochie sound, and two bloody figures fell to the ground behind Lu Yi. Lu Yi frowned, and he tilted his head to look. These two people were so aggressive, and their words were full of arrogance. Lu Yi had thought that they were very powerful, but this was it. The confidence that the so-called Great Heavenly God gave them was a bit too inflated. This time, Lu Yi used a heavy hand, and the two of them were directly cut into 4 halves. They couldn't be more dead. Lu Yi withdrew his Pan Mountain saber, and his divine sense confirmed that they were already dead. The power of Feng around their wounds had also dissipated. The existence of the power of Feng was dependent on vitality. Strictly speaking, it was devouring a cultivator's vitality to maintain itself. Therefore, if there was no vitality, then the power of Feng couldn't exist alone. Lu Yi took a step forward and prepared to leave. However, his expression suddenly changed, and he looked toward the two corpses. In the next instant, a look of shock appeared on his face. He saw that the wounds of the two corpses were actually blooming with a faint light, and under the guidance of that light, the broken pieces of the two cultivators' bodies actually closed up. In the blink of an eye, the terrifying wounds healed, and then an astonishing vitality bloomed from their bodies. Lu Yi was dumbfounded. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he wouldn't have dared to believe that there was such a ridiculous thing in this world. Coming back from the dead was a word that could only be heard in legends, but now it was actually happening right under his nose. These two, what were they? Lu Yi was sure that they were definitely flesh and blood. The feeling of the Pan Mountain sabers couldn't be wrong. But since they were flesh and blood, how could they not die? Looking at it this way, they had also come back from the dead before. The moment they came back to life, the two cultivators rushed toward Lu Yi again. However, after suffering a loss just now, they probably knew that their strength was inferior to Lu Yi's, so their gazes became extremely resolute. Lu Yi frowned. What he saw in front of him had already surpassed his understanding, but he still had no intention of dodging the attacks of the two cultivators. He didn't know what method these two had used to come back from the dead, but there couldn't be such a ridiculous thing in this world. If they couldn't be killed once, and they couldn't be killed twice, then what about 3 times, 5 times, 10 times, 100 times? He wanted to see if these two were truly immortal and indestructible. The Pan Mountain saber slashed out so quickly that the two cultivators had no time to react. However, just as they were about to die, surging magic power suddenly surged out without restraint. Then with 2 loud booms, they exploded into a bloody mist. Blood splattered everywhere, and a black mist so dense that it was almost tangible wrapped around Lu Yi's body. This was the extreme concentration of magic power from the two cultivators. Lu Yi immediately sensed that something was wrong, because his innate skill tree was reacting even more strongly. The innate skill tree was already burning away the power of misfortune from the die of fate, so now it was clearly burdened. These two cultivators' magic power was poisonous. He immediately recalled the injuries of the old man, who had entrusted his child to him. The old man had shown signs of being poisoned, so it must have come from these two cultivators. Suddenly, Lu Yi understood where these two cultivators' confidence came from. They were indeed no match for him, but this kind of dirty trick was impossible to guard against. Once they fell for it, they could use their immortal bodies to slowly grind their opponents to death. If it were any other cultivator, they would be powerless and could only temporarily leave to find a place to recuperate. However, Lu Yi was not afraid of this at all. The stronger reaction from his innate skill tree had already disappeared. Clearly, the poison that had invaded his body had been completely burned away. He looked up and saw that countless pieces of flesh were reassembling, quickly piecing together the silhouettes of two cultivators, faintly showing signs of resurrection. Lu Yi did not make a move, but waited instead. After 3 breaths, the two cultivators suddenly burst out with vitality that only the living could have. At this moment, the saber light flashed, and the two cultivators who were almost resurrected were once again annihilated. Resurrection again and again, death again and again. It seemed like they really were immortal and indestructible. However, Lu Yi keenly sensed that the speed of their resurrection was slowing down after each death. After 5 times, it had become very slow, and it took about half an hour for their vitality to show signs of recovery. During the process of their resurrection, Lu Yi also tried to probe their bodies to see if there were any mysteries. However, even if he chopped them into minced meat, he could not find anything. After the 8th time, the two cultivators' resurrection took half an hour, and after their resurrection, the vitality in their bodies was greatly reduced. This made Lu Yi even more certain of his guess. No matter why these two cultivators could be resurrected, they were not really immortal and indestructible. There was a price to pay for their resurrection. After the 12th time, the pieces of flesh in the sky suddenly turned into specks of fluorescent light and disappeared. Lu Yi was stunned for a moment before he realized that Yu Yao had really died in these 2 months. And they were the shadows. When Lu Yi killed them for the first time, he thought that they were also cultivators who came to gain experience. End of chapter. Chapter 1919. Standing in place, Lu Yi muttered to himself for a long time. He faintly felt that this training would be somewhat troublesome. He was not afraid of a simple battle between Yu Yao and Yu Yao. With his current strength, He was basically invincible in the same realm. Even if he encountered the slightly weaker Ri Guang, it was not as if he had no trump cards. However, the two cultivators who could come back from the dead made him feel troubled. It was the first time he had encountered such existences. Although they were far from being immortal and indestructible, their method of resurrection was shocking enough. Soon after, he recalled that these shadows in the Azura field were condensed from the traces left behind by cultivators of a certain era. They were recreated by the Azura field using its supreme and profound power. In that case, in a certain period of time in history, did those two cultivators really exist? And they said that they were disciples of the great heavenly God, so there were definitely more than two such existences. Just how powerful was the great heavenly God? Thinking about it more deeply, if there were such strange shadows in the Azura field, then what about in the starry sky? Were there also such shadows? It was just that the starry sky was too vast, and no one could know everything. Lu Yi secretly rejoiced. He had encountered the disciples of the great heavenly God during his training. If he had encountered them outside, he might have really suffered a loss if he was not careful. He collected his thoughts and turned around to leave. After a short while, he returned to the small village. It was drizzling, and the rough man was still squatting under the eaves. Inside the house, a simple woman was holding a baby, gently patting it and humming an unknown lullaby. The baby had already fallen asleep. Seeing Lu Yi return, the woman stood up and handed the baby over. Lu Yi took it and said, "Thank you, madam." The woman had never heard such a title in her life, so she was a little reserved. She waved her hand and said in a low voice, "No need, no need." Then, she thought of something, and turned around to pick up an ancient water bag from the table beside her. "There is some breast milk in here. If the baby is hungry, heat it up and feed it to him. But don't make it too hot, or it will hurt him." Lu Yi nodded, and put away the water bag. His divine sense rummaged through his storage ring, but he found that there was nothing he could give away. Spirit jades, spirit crystals, and the like were naturally not suitable, let alone treasures. He had no choice but to thank them again. After bidding farewell to the couple, Lu Yi withdrew his precious blood clone, leaped up, and disappeared in the blink of an eye. He didn't know where the Cloud Radish Holy Land was, but when he was chatting with the course man, he heard about a place called the Cloud Radish Mountain. The man hadn't been there before. After all, it was too far away, so he only gave him a general direction. Lu Yi naturally wasn't worried that he wouldn't be able to find it. He was prepared to ask someone along the way. Currently, this realm was not peaceful. There were unknown enemies invading from beyond the heavens, and there were also the so-called Great Deity sect causing chaos within the realm. There was definitely some relationship between the two. As Lu Yi walked forward, he kept thinking about what his mission was. After thinking about it for a while, he felt that it had something to do with resolving the crisis in this realm. However, he had too little information at the moment, so he didn't dare to act rashly. Ignoring the future, his current mission was obviously to send the baby in his arms to the Cloud Radish Holy Land. Perhaps everything would be clear once he reached there. It didn't take much effort for Lu Yi to find the location of the Cloud Radish Holy Land. As long as he entered the Cloud Radish Mountain, he would see the active figures of cultivators from time to time. After casually inquiring, he knew the specific location of the Cloud Radish Holy Land. He could feel that the security here was very tight. There were cultivators from the Cloud Radish Holy Land patrolling everywhere. This made Lu Yi realize that the trouble in this realm might be more serious than he had thought. After explaining his purpose, Lu Yi was led to the Cloud Radish Holy Land by a team of patrolling cultivators. Then he was placed in a guest hall. The baby in his arms cried again. It should be hungry. Lu Yi took out the water bag and slightly urged his spirit power to heat the breast milk inside. Then, he wrapped it in his magic power and sent it into the baby's mouth little by little. Now that he had arrived at the Cloud Radish Holy Land, what should he do next? Just as Lu Yi was pondering, he suddenly heard footsteps coming from the side. He turned his head and saw a tall and beautiful woman with a cold temperament walking towards him aggressively. She was wearing a white dress that was covered in blood, but there were no traces of injuries on her body. She gritted her teeth, and looked at Lu Yi, as if she had some irreconcilable hatred with him. Lu Yi frowned. He didn't know what was going on. The woman walked in front of him and lowered her head to look at him. Lu Yi met her gaze. His eyes were clear. The woman looked at the baby in Lu Ye's arms. Then, she turned to another cultivator behind her and said, "Bring the baby over." Another woman with a sword behind her stepped forward and reached out her hand to Lu Yi. Lu Yi blinked and decisively handed the baby over. He heaved a sigh of relief. He had finally handed the baby over. Although he didn't know why the old man wanted him to bring the baby here before he died. As long as he brought the baby over, the mission was completed. As for who to hand the baby over to, Lu Yi didn't know who to hand it over to. Almost as soon as Lu Yi handed over the baby, the tall woman suddenly raised her hand. Lu Yi instinctively wanted to dodge, but after thinking about it, he didn't dodge. This was because he didn't feel any malice from the woman's actions, even though she seemed to hate him to the core. In the next instant, Lu Yi felt his ear being pinched by a warm and soft hand. The tall woman gritted her teeth and said, "You're finally willing to come back, my good junior brother." Lu Yi couldn't help but tilt his head. He immediately understood his identity on this trip. He was this tall woman's junior brother. This was clearly the Azura Fields arrangement. Lu Yi should have known before entering this place. Unfortunately, there seemed to be a problem when he entered this place. The tall woman suddenly frowned. She slowly loosened her grip on Lu Ye's ear and looked at him in surprise. Then she hesitantly asked, "What's wrong?" A thought flashed through Lu Ye's mind. Then he said, "I forgot a lot of things." He had to quickly find out more useful information. Playing the fool was undoubtedly the best method. "You forgot a lot of things?" The tall woman's expression changed. Then, she grabbed Lu Ye's wrist and examined him with rapt attention. After a short while, she looked at Lu Yi. "Do you know who I am?" Lu Yi shook his head. He really didn't know. A pained expression immediately appeared in the woman's eyes. Her voice trembled as she asked, "Then you definitely don't know who you are?" Lu Yi still shook his head. The woman's beautiful eyes were already filled with mist. At this moment, her cold expression blossomed like water. She sighed and stepped forward. She hugged Lu Yi and gently patted his back as if she was coaxing a child. "It's okay. Let's go home. Everything will be fine from now on." Lu Yi felt his cheeks being wrapped in too astonishing softness. After a short while, Lu Yi finally figured out his identity on this trip. The current holy disciple of the Cloudvine Holy Land. Compared to his previous identity, this identity was undoubtedly much more righteous. Lu Yi was very satisfied. At least the Azura Field had some humanity this time. He finally didn't have to be an evil person. As for the tall woman, she was his senior sister Sun Ninyue. Many years ago, this holy disciple Lu Yi had left the Cloudvine Holy Land for some unknown reason. Since then, there had been no news of him. Only today did he suddenly return. It could be seen that Sun Ninyue was extremely good to this junior brother of hers. All of the changes in her emotions just now were her true feelings. "Your child." Sun Ninyue looked at the baby in the arms of the sword-wielding woman. Lu Yi shook his head and said, "An old man entrusted him to me before he died. He asked me to bring him here. I guess the child's relatives might be here." Sun Ninyue understood. This realm is currently facing external and internal problems. Who knows how many sects have been destroyed? The Holy Land has become the core of the resistance against external enemies. 80% of this realm's cultivators have gathered here to listen to orders. There are also some who have fled here. I'll send someone to look for him. Perhaps there will be some clues. That's good. Lu Yi nodded. Sun Ninyue's arrangement was undoubtedly suitable. Then he asked, "What's going on with this realm?" Sun Ninyue's expression darkened. She immediately explained to Lu Yi in detail. After her explanation, Lu Yi finally understood the background of this trip. This was the final Soul Realm, located in a relatively rich star system. This star system had several large star domains. A few years ago, a group of uninvited guests arrived and caused a conflict. When the news spread, several large star domains immediately decided to join forces to resist the enemy. They each mobilized cultivators from their own star domains to form an allied army, and fought against the external enemies in the starry sky. When the war was intense and both sides suffered casualties, the final Soul Realm was also invaded. Caught off guard, this realm suffered a great loss. Fortunately, Sunshine, who was left behind to guard this realm, reacted quickly and immediately adopted a corresponding countermeasure. Right now, the Sunshine Powerhouse led this realm's cultivators to form a defensive line outside the realm. Even so, many enemies still managed to infiltrate this realm, killing and destroying all kinds of things in the realm. Those enemies are very strange and very dangerous. Sun Ninua's tone was heavy. Lu Yi said, "Do they almost have an immortal body? No matter how serious their injuries are, they can recover very quickly. You encountered them?" Sun Ninua looked at Lu Yi in surprise. Lu Yi nodded. Sun Ninua said, "Yes, their recovery ability is extremely terrifying. Even a decapitation wound can't kill them. If you want to kill them completely, you can only kill them many times in a short period of time, until they can't take it anymore. They call themselves Heavenly God's disciples, and often mention the name of Great Heavenly God." Lu Yi had personally experienced the strangeness of these so-called Heavenly God's disciples. Naturally, he knew how difficult it was to deal with them. Not every cultivator had the ability to kill enemies as quickly as he did. With the recovery ability of those Heavenly God's disciples, if there was no way to kill them many times in a short period of time, even if they were stronger than the enemy, they would slowly be tortured to death. "Is there no way to kill them in one blow?" Lu Yi asked. Sun Ninua said, "This is the direction we need to look for." Chapter 1920. In the hall, Lu Yi and Sun Ninua had a detailed discussion, and he had a vague insight. His next goal should be to find a way to quickly kill Empyrean god apprentices. If he could find it, then this experience would be a great harvest. Just as he was thinking this, Sun Ninua suddenly glanced at the mountain pandao at his waist, her gaze complicated. "It's been so many years, and you're still carrying it." Huh. Lu Yi was stunned. The mountain pandao. Did it have a special origin in this training scene? Sun Ninua sighed. "We're weak medical cultivators, junior brother. We only care about saving the dying and healing the injured. We don't need to fight. You were like this in the past. You were clearly talented in the medical path, but you chose to walk the path of a soldier cultivator, which made Master unhappy. Now you're still. So I'm a weak medical cultivator." Lu Yi blinked. Was there really something wrong with the Azura field? How could he know anything about the medical path? Why was he given such an identity in this training? He felt helpless. However, Sun Ninua did say that the reason why the cultivators of the Netherworld realm treated the Cloud Radish sacred ground as the core to resist the foreign enemies was because it was a famous medical holy land in the entire realm. The fierce confrontation was destined to cause many injuries, and the injured cultivators would return here to seek treatment. Now all the medical cultivators of the Netherworld realm were gathered here. Lu Yi's current identity was the holy son of the Cloud Radish sacred ground, so his talent in the medical path was naturally extraordinary. But in fact, he didn't know anything about it. Sun Ninua was also a medical cultivator, and she was the most accomplished one in the entire Netherworld realm. The bloodstains on her body were all from saving people. Forget it. If you like it, then take it. Sun Ninua was undoubtedly very tolerant of Lu Yi. Since you've just returned, you should go and rest first. Zhai Xinglu is still the same as before. Back then, after you left, Master would often go there. Every time she would be depressed. I'll arrange another guard for you later. Lu Yi keenly realized something and asked, "Where's Master?" This Master must be a sunshine expert, because his cultivation wasn't weak, and Sun Ninua seemed to be at the late stage of the Moonjade realm. Given the size of the Yunluo sacred ground, there were definitely Sunshine Realm cultivators. Sun Ninua explained, "Master went out to fight with the Realm Lord. But don't worry, news just came back a few days ago. Although the battle over there is intense, Master is only in charge of treatment and doesn't need to go into battle to kill the enemy." From the looks of it, his master was indeed a medical cultivator. Sun Ninua sent a message to the outside. Immediately, a cultivator walked in from outside. It was a very cute girl. When she got close, she said in a crisp voice, "Senior sister." Sun Ninyue nodded. Duo, take your senior brother to Zhaixing Lu." "Yes." The girl called Duo hurriedly responded, then looked at Lu Yi. "Senior brother, please follow me." Lu Yi left with her. Zhaixing Lu was not far from here. It was on another spiritual peak. Along the way, Duo led the way, occasionally turning her head to look at Lu Yi. Her clear eyes were full of curiosity. "You know me?" Lu Yi asked. Duo said, "Senior brother, you don't remember me? I've forgotten what happened before." Duo suddenly showed a sympathetic look and said, "I'm Aki Duo. I entered the sect with you before. Senior brother, you saved me before." As he said this, he lifted his shirt and put on an innocent look. "Look, you're the one who helped to treat the injuries here." Lu Yi glanced at her and found that there was indeed a faint scar on the side of her waist, but it was still conspicuous because of her snow-white and delicate skin. The scar was very long and should have been quite serious back then. There were many cultivators flying around nearby. Aki Duo's action immediately attracted many pairs of eyes. Lu Yi was speechless. "Put down your clothes. Little girl, what a scandal." "Oh!" Aki Duo hurriedly put down her clothes. Not long after, they arrived at Zhaixing Lu. Aki Duo led Lu Yi here and left. Lu Yi looked up and saw that the entire Zhaixing Lu had 9 floors and was about 300 feet high. There was only one building in this huge spirit mountain. In front of the building was a huge platform square. There was no aura of life in the building. It seemed that this place was not open to the public. Since he was here, Lu Yi stepped toward Zhaixing Lu and temporarily stayed in a room on the first floor. Sitting cross-legged on the praying mat, Lu Yi's mind was immersed in investigating the movement of the talent tree. Most of the bad luck added to his body by the dice of fate had been burned away. Moreover, Lu Yi discovered one thing. The bad luck added to his body this time did not seem to be very strong. It only allowed him to pick up a baby at the beginning, and then meet 2 disciples of God. The rest of the journey was peaceful. According to the current progress, it should take another day for the power of misfortune to be completely burned out. This was a small problem. The biggest problem he needed to face now was this experience. Because the Azura field did not provide any information and intelligence, Lu Yi could only cross the river by feeling the stones. He had to explore everything by himself. Sending the baby to the Yinluo Holy Land was only the first step. Through the conversation with Sun Ninyue, Lu Yi already knew what he should do next. He was not in a hurry. To be on the safe side, he had to wait until the power of misfortune was completely burned out. A day passed by quickly. Lu Yi stood up and walked out after he sensed that the talent tree was no longer acting strangely. However, as soon as he walked out, a figure descended from the sky and landed directly in front of him. Lu Yi looked carefully and found that it was a kiddo. "Senior brother." Lu Yi nodded. "What's the matter?" A kiddo said. "Senior sister Sun said that if senior brother has rested well, please go to the Rinyuan Valley. There are many injured people there who need to be treated." Lu Yi suddenly felt a headache. He was good at killing people, but how could he know how to save people? He secretly rejoiced that he had the foresight to give Sun Ninyue the impression that he had completely lost his memory when he saw her. Since he had lost his memory, it was normal for him to forget about medicine. He had to explain it to Sun Ninyue face to face. Otherwise, this senior sister would probably rely on him to help. "Let's go." With that said, Lu Yi and Akido flew toward the Rinyuan Valley. The Rinyuan Valley was very large. It was originally a place where cultivators in need of treatment came to the Yinluo Holy Land for treatment. Now it was used as a place to treat the injured cultivators from the battle. Although cultivators of the upper realm were full of vitality and energy, and could recover from ordinary injuries on their own. Yu Yao could even regrow a severed arm. However, their speed of recovery was naturally not as fast as that of medical cultivators. In such a great battle, the number of medical cultivators and the strength of their skills would affect the direction of the battle to a certain extent. Now all the medical cultivators in the final soul realm were gathered in the Yinluo Holy Land. When Lu Yi arrived at the Rinyuan Valley, he found that there were busy cultivators everywhere. The smell of blood filled the air. Sun Yinue was busy in one place. She activated her magic power, and a gentle power wrapped around a cultivator who had lost an arm in front of her. The cultivator's face was full of pain, and sweat dripped from his forehead. There was no sign of flesh and blood growing from the severed arm. Instead, there was some black mist lingering around it. Even the cultivator's face was a little gloomy. This immediately reminded Lu Yi of the strangeness of the disciples of God. Their magic power was very strange. Lu Yi had felt it when he was fighting with the two disciples of God. This cultivator who was being treated was obviously injured by the disciples of God. Senior sister. Lu Yi came to Sun Yinyue's side and stood still. Sun Yinyue turned to look at him. Come and take over. I'll teach you how to detoxify the poison. The magic power of those disciples of God is strange. If you don't deal with it first, it will be difficult to recover. After saying that, she immediately took a step back. Seeing that Lu Yi was still standing in the same place, she couldn't help but urge, "Don't be in a daze." Lu Yi originally wanted to explain to Sun Yinyue that he didn't have the means to save people. What he needed to do now was to find a way to quickly kill the disciples of God. This was definitely an important direction for this experience. But after seeing the situation of this cultivator with a severed arm, he suddenly realized something. Under normal circumstances, the identity that the Shiraba arranged for cultivators was basically based on the cultivator's previous performance. It wouldn't be too outrageous. For example, a constellation cultivator. Even if the Shiraba arranged an identity for him as Sunshine, he wouldn't be able to exert that kind of power. Such a paper tiger naturally wouldn't have a good ending when he entered the experience scene. In this experience, the identity that the Shiraba arranged for him was a medical cultivator. Lu Yi originally felt that something was wrong, but now he finally understood why there was such an arrangement. He had previously received a few bounty missions to detoxify people in the bounty hall. Because he had shown the ability to detoxify people, he was given such an identity as a medical cultivator. So that was the case. Lu Ye's heart suddenly understood. This made sense. As his thoughts turned, he stepped forward and raised his hand to put it on the shoulder of the cultivator with a severed arm. Sun Yinyue's voice sounded in his ear. The disciple of God's mana is like a kind of poison, but it's not a poison at all. It has the strange ability to devour other people's mana to strengthen itself. Only the medical cultivator's means can suppress and detoxify it. So there are injured Taoists sent here. What we need to do is... As she spoke, Sun Yinyue's voice gradually grew weaker and weaker, and her eyes slowly widened. Because she saw an extremely incredible scene. The strange power of the disciple of God, which she felt was extremely difficult to deal with, was actually disappearing at a speed visible to the naked eye. She only spoke for a few breaths of time, but in just this short period of time, the black fog lingering around the wound of the cultivator with a severed arm, along with the obscurity on his face, disappeared without a trace. The cultivator with the severed arm also clearly felt the changes in his body. The original hardships quickly disappeared, and his expression became calm and peaceful. His cultivation was not ordinary. As long as he resolved the disciple of God's mana, the remaining injuries were nothing to him. End of this chapter. Chapter 1921. The flesh and blood on the broken arm wriggled, and granulation grew out. This was undoubtedly the self-healing of a powerful body, and it also showed that the strange power of the enlightened disciple had been completely resolved. Sun Ninyue suddenly turned her head to look at Lu Yi, and her face was full of disbelief. She had no idea what her junior brother had done to have such an immediate effect. The one-armed cultivator opened his eyes and looked at Lu Yi with admiration. This fellow cultivator has extraordinary skills. How may I address you? He had been fighting in this world for several years and was repeatedly injured by the enlightened disciple. But there had never been a medical cultivator who could help him solve his problem so quickly. Sun Ninyue came back to her senses, suppressed the shock in her heart, and proudly said, "This is my junior brother." The one-armed cultivator was surprised. "Are you the miracle medical sage Lu Yi?" Lu Yi's mouth twitched. He didn't know that he had such a famous name. He didn't know about it at all. But then again, miracle medical sage was much more pleasant to the ear than sect destroyer Yi. "Yes, junior brother just returned from his travels a few days ago," Sun Ninyue explained. The one-armed cultivator probably wanted to salute, but found that he couldn't do it without an arm, so he could only nod to Lu Yi. "I've heard a lot about you. Today I see that you really live up to your reputation." "You flatter me." Lu Yi blushed with shame. Sun Ninyue stepped forward and began to heal the one-armed cultivator. She turned to Lu Yi and said, "Junior brother, since you have the means to quickly resolve the power of the enlightened disciple, why don't you take care of this matter?" She originally wanted to test whether her junior brother's medical skills had improved in the years he had been missing, but now it seemed that there was no need to test him. She was far inferior to his magical skills, and even her master couldn't do it. Her junior brother was really a genius, born to save lives and heal the wounded. Sun Ninyue's proposal was undoubtedly what Lu Yi wanted. He couldn't save people because he didn't have the means to do so, but it was just to resolve the strange power of the enlightened disciple, which was too easy for him. He immediately nodded. "Okay." 80% of the injured cultivators in the Rinyuan Valley had the strange power of the divine disciple left in their bodies. This was the biggest problem for medical practitioners to treat them. Before Lu Yi appeared, all medical practitioners had to spend a lot of energy and time to solve this problem. In fact, only a small part of the time was spent on treating the injured cultivators. Because they were all cultivators in the upper realm, as long as the strange power of the divine disciple was resolved, with the assistance of medical practitioners, coupled with their own recovery ability and spirit pills, it was not difficult to recover. Lu Yi walked and stopped in the Rinyuan Valley. With the help of the talent tree, he helped one cultivator after another to resolve the strange power of the divine disciple. This matter was beneficial to him. Although there was no information to guide him, Lu Yi could feel that this was also a training mission for him. The better he completed it, the more Azura seals he could obtain. Moreover, no matter what his mission was this time, he had to win this battle against the divine disciple. Helping the practitioners on his side to recover quickly was undoubtedly a kind of help. Only half a day later, the name of the miracle healer spread far and wide. With Lu Ye's help, the number of injured cultivators in Rinyuan Valley rapidly decreased. Those who had recovered quickly rushed out of the boundary and joined the battle again. At the same time, outside the final serene world, there was a huge palace with cultivators constantly coming in and out. This place was the foundation of the final serene world's external defense line. The entire galaxy had been invaded by foreign enemies. The largest battlefield was in the depths of the starry sky. However, every boundary in the galaxy had its own battlefield. Sitting in this palace was a sunshine cultivator from the final serene world called Tian Hong. He was also the only sunshine cultivator to stay in the final serene world. The others, such as the Holy Lord of the Cloud Radish Holy Land, had followed the Realm Lord out to fight. At this moment, he was looking through a lot of information in his hands, frowning from time to time. After several years of fighting, the situation was still unclear. Their world had suffered a lot of losses, but the enemy showed no signs of retreating. The main reason was that the divine disciple was too difficult to kill. So far, they had not found a way to kill him in one blow. Especially Sunshine, who was on the opposite side. In terms of strength, he was stronger than him. He had killed him as many as 3 times, but he could quickly recover each time. However, because of the divine disciple's strange immortal body, he could not kill him. Suddenly, his eyes lit up as he saw a piece of information that he was interested in. After pondering for a moment, he said, "Pass the order. Ask the left front general to come back and see me." "Yes." The cultivator immediately responded and sent out the message. After waiting for about half an hour, a burly figure stepped in from the outside. Wrapped in a shocking murderous aura, his body was covered in blood. It was obvious that he had gone through a battle. This was the left front general, the strongest cultivator under Tianhong's command. The left front general cupped his fists and said, "Greetings, Lord Tianhong." Tianhong nodded slightly. "There is a mission for you to do." The left front general said in a deep voice, "Please give the order, Lord." His eyebrows were filled with eagerness. This experience was extremely strange. Everything was confusing. Now that he finally had a clear mission, he secretly decided that even if the other party wanted him to assassinate that disciple of Rizhao heavenly god, he would give it a try. Return to this world and go to the Yunluo holy ground. Protect the current holy son of the Yunluo holy ground. Do not let anything happen to him. Tianhong ordered. The left front general thought that he had misheard and could not help but ask, "Lord, you want me to protect the holy son of the Yunluo holy ground? I am the strongest cultivator under your command, Yu Yao. You don't want me to charge and kill the enemy, but you want me to protect someone?" "That's right," Tianhong replied. "There is no time to lose. Let's go now." The left front general's mouth twitched, but in the end he was speechless. This was a mission that he had clearly received, and he could not reject it. Moreover, judging from Tianhong's tone, he was afraid that he could not reject it. Your killing intent is too strong. When you reach the Yunluo holy ground, restrain yourself. 90% of this world's medical cultivators are gathered there. They are all weak cultivators who do not participate in battles. Do not scare them. When you return, go find Sun Ninyue and listen to her arrangements. Tianhong was worried and reminded him. Understood, the left front general replied. He turned around and left the main hall of the palace. He rubbed his big bald head and helplessly flew towards the final soul world. He was in the middle of killing enemies when he was suddenly summoned back to be a bodyguard. This made him feel very unhappy. After a while, the left front general entered the final world and entered the Yunluo holy ground. After asking around, he found Sun Ninyue, who was treating the wounded and dying in the Renyuan Valley. When they met face to face, Sun Ninyue suddenly felt very safe when she saw his huge physique and ferocious face. She originally wanted to arrange another Yu Yao to be her junior brother's bodyguard. However, after her junior brother displayed his miraculous skills, she knew that her arrangement was inappropriate. She immediately sent a message to Tianhong in the outer realm, asking him to help find a more suitable bodyguard. The person in front of her should have been arranged by Martial Uncle Tianhong. After a simple conversation, the left front general flew toward Jiaxinglu. At Jiaxinglu, Lu Yi had returned. He had finished treating the injured cultivators in the Renyuan Valley. Then Sun Ninyue, his senior sister, rushed him back to rest and recuperate. In Sun Ninyue's opinion, although her junior brother's method of dealing with the strange power of the enlightened disciples was marvelous, it must have consumed a lot of energy. After treating so many cultivators in such a short period of time, he naturally needed to rest. This was exactly what Lu Yi wanted. If Sun Ninyue really asked him to help treat her injuries, he really did not know what to do. Next, he only needed to stroll around the Renyuan Valley every day and help the injured cultivators deal with the power of the enlightened disciples. The rest would be to explore and find a way to kill the enlightened disciples in one strike. In this way, he had to catch an enlightened disciple to study. Although he had killed 2 enlightened gods' disciples and carefully examined their condition after death, he did not study it too deeply. Such research had been done many times in the final world. When he left the Renyuan Valley just now, he mentioned it to Sun Ninyue. Sun Ninyue told him to come back and wait. She would order someone to send the information of the previous research. Not long after, a familiar voice called out, "Senior brother, come in." Lu Yi recognized Akijuo's voice. Akijuo pushed the door and entered, then handed Lu Yi a few jade slips. "This is what senior sister Sun asked me to give you." Lu Yi took it and nodded. "Thank you for your hard work." Akijuo smiled sweetly. "It's not hard. Senior brother, I'm leaving." "Go ahead." After Akijuo left, Lu Yi was about to check the information in the jade slip when he suddenly felt a powerful aura quickly approaching. Lu Ye's first reaction was that someone was sneaking up on him, but after sensing the aura, he suddenly frowned because this aura was inexplicably familiar. A loud bang came from the square outside, followed by a familiar loud voice. "Where is Holy Child Yun Luo?" He was naturally unhappy that he had been sent back to be a bodyguard, but he couldn't refuse. After thinking about it, the best way was to show his fierceness and make Saint Child Yun Luo fear him. It would be best if Saint Child Yun Luo took the initiative to change his bodyguard. A weak medical cultivator. If he casually scared him, he would definitely be scared out of his wits. Thinking of this, his expression became more and more ferocious, and he bared his teeth as if he was going to eat someone. Then he saw a head poking out from the front door. His expression suddenly became much more ferocious, as if he was really an evil spirit descending into the world. Their eyes met. His ferocious face suddenly became startled, and the corners of his eyes could not help but tremble. He could not help but recall all kinds of things in the battlefield. For a moment he thought he was seeing things. He raised his hand to rub his eyes and found that he was not seeing things. "Ha! Ah!" The two of them both exclaimed in surprise, obviously not expecting to meet each other here, and in such a way. Lu Yi walked out of the star-picking tower and smiled gently at the left front general. "What a coincidence we meet again." The left front general frowned, completely sure of Lu Ye's identity. He suddenly recalled Tianhong's evaluation before leaving. Was this the so-called weak medical cultivator that he needed to protect? Was there a mistake somewhere? End of chapter. Chapter 1922. In the stargazing pavilion, Lu Yi and the left front general sat across from each other in silence. However, the left front general was rather speechless as he looked at Lu Yi. What was going on over at Tianhong's side? This person in front of him was even stronger than him. Why would he need his protection? With Lu Ye's strength, unless Rizhao personally intervened, Yu Yao probably wouldn't be able to withstand a single strike from him. After all, he had personally experienced Lu Ye's strength. "Fellow Taoist Luo," Lu Yi suddenly said. The left front general was taken aback at first, but he quickly reacted. "My name is Abdullah." Lu Yi nodded. "Fellow Taoist Luo, it's fate that brought us together. Also, it seems like we're on the same side for this trial, so we're considered companions. Why don't we exchange information?" There were many things that he didn't understand. He originally wanted to find an opportunity to find a cultivator to ask about the situation, but who would have thought that Abdullah would suddenly appear in front of him? He just didn't know why this guy had such a fierce expression when they first met. Abdullah sighed. "Call me whatever you want. We can exchange information, of course, but I don't have much information on my side." Lu Yi raised his eyebrows. "What do you mean?" Abdullah frowned. "This trial is a little strange. I've never encountered such a situation before. When I entered the trial scene this time, I waited in the darkness for a long time. Moreover, the Azura field didn't provide any useful information, so I was directly thrown in." "You too?" Lu Yi looked at him in shock. Abdullah said, "Too? Could it be?" Lu Yi nodded. "Me too." Through Abdullah's description, he undoubtedly knew that Abdullah had experienced the same thing as him before entering this trial scene. At first, he only felt that something was a little off, but now it seemed that there really was something wrong with the Azura field, right? "This is interesting." Abro stroked his chin in contemplation. Unlike Lu Yi, he had been here for many years and had entered and exited various training grounds countless times, but none of them were as strange as this one. "Then tell me what information you have," Lu Yi said. Abdullah naturally didn't hide anything and immediately told him everything. Lu Yi listened carefully, and then realized that he knew more or less the same things as himself. The only thing he knew was that the cultivators of the star system were currently fighting against foreign enemies in outer space, and that the battle in this world was also intense. Abdullah's identity was Yu Yao, the strongest subordinate of Tianhong. Before he was summoned back, he had been fighting outside. He had personally experienced the strangeness of the disciples of gods. They were extremely difficult to kill. Even if those disciples of gods were smashed into pieces, they could quickly recover. Only after dying a certain number of times would they truly die. After Abdullah finished speaking, Lu Yi reported the information he had gathered. After a brief discussion, Abdullah said, "According to my experience and deduction, we only have one main mission this time. I'd like to hear the details." Lu Yi humbly asked for guidance. In terms of experience in the Azura arena, Abdullah was definitely much more experienced than him. Assist the cultivators of this world in protecting the final soul realm. Lu Ye's eyes flashed when he heard this. What about the main battlefield in the starry skies? Even if the final soul realm is protected, if the main battlefield loses, how can any eggs remain intact when the nest is overturned? Abdullah said, "Brother Lu, you have to understand that there is no such thing as a sure death situation in the Azura arena. No matter how dangerous the situation is, there is always a chance of survival. Otherwise, the original purpose of the experience would be lost. What are we? We are Yu Yao, the main battlefield in the depths of the starry skies. If we rashly intervene, how can we have a good end? Although there are also disciples of gods in outer space, there is Tianhong suppressing them. In fact, as long as we are careful, we won't encounter them directly." After pausing for a moment, Abdullah said earnestly, "Brother, let me teach you a good lesson. In this Azura arena, do as much as you can. Don't be too far-sighted, or you'll easily suffer losses." Lu Yi nodded. Understood. In that case, this experiential learning mission was indeed not too dangerous. As long as he could assist Tianhong in protecting the final soul realm, the experiential learning should be considered complete. He originally wanted to find a way to kill the disciples of gods in one blow, but if that was the case, it wouldn't be so troublesome. "Brother Lu." Abdullah looked at him eagerly. It was obvious that he had sensed Lu Sheng's intentions. "Let's go," Lu Yi said. "That's the way it should be." Abdullah laughed and got up. The two left Jiaxing Lu together and flew straight into outer space. Outside Jiaxing Lu, Achi Dua looked at the two leaving figures, and a strange silver light flashed in his eyes. "Brother Lu, today you and I will join forces and kill those disciples of gods. The sooner we finish, the sooner we go back. I will treat you to a drink." Abdullah shouted as he flew. For him, disciples of gods were not difficult to kill. It was just a matter of killing them a few times. Now that he had Lu Yi, who was stronger than him, to join forces, he couldn't think of any chance of the enemy winning. As for the mission of protecting Lu Yi, it was something he didn't need to worry about. However, what the two did not expect was that as soon as they left the boundary, they suddenly saw a figure blocking their way. Abdullah's figure paused, and he hurriedly stopped. Lu Yi also stopped, looking dignified. Although the figure blocking them did not reveal any aura, he still felt a little heavy. He had seen many big and small Rizhao, so he could tell at a glance that the other party was definitely Rizhao, Tianhong, or Rizhao's disciple. In this position, it was most likely Tianhong. Sure enough, Abdullah saluted. "Greetings, Lord Tianhong." Lu Yi also saluted. Tianhong was a thin old man, standing there with his hands behind his back. He looked at Lu Yi and then at Abdullah. "Where are you going?" Abdullah immediately replied, "Lord, we are going to the battlefield to kill the enemy." Tianhong immediately scolded. "Nonsense. Left front general, I asked you to protect Saint Yun Luo. Is this how you protect him? If something happens to him on the battlefield, can you bear the responsibility?" Abdullah explained, "Lord, you may not know, but Saint Yun Luo and I have known each other for a long time. In fact, his strength." "Don't talk too much. Hurry up and return to the inner realm. It is not safe outside." Tianhong waved his hand, too lazy to listen to Abdullah's nonsense. He looked at Lu Yi, his stern expression gradually softening. "You are the best medical cultivator in this realm. Only with you in charge of this realm can the soldiers be at ease to kill the enemy outside. So remember, your safety is not only related to you, but also the future of this realm." When he said this, Lu Yi suddenly felt a heavy weight on his shoulders. Tianhong looked at Abdullah again, and his tone suddenly became more serious. protect him well. If you dare to neglect your duty again, I will personally deal with you." After saying this, he turned and left, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Lu Yi and Abdullah looked at each other. After a while, Abdullah scratched his bald head. What the hell is going on? Tianheng actually appeared. This was something he did not expect at all. Moreover, it was such a coincidence that as soon as they left the outer realm, Tianheng accurately intercepted them. Of course, he could not ignore Rizhao's words. Rizhao obviously did not want them to go out to kill the enemy. If he forced them to leave, Tianheng would definitely not sit back and watch. Facing Rizhao, he was still a little afraid. But in his opinion, as long as he and Lu Yi worked together, the crisis of Final Realm could be easily solved. Of course, the premise was that Tianheng took action to restrain Rizhao's disciple. Let's go back first. Lu Yi thought for a moment, then turned and flew back to the inner realm. Returning to Stargazing Tower, Abdullah was extremely irritated, pacing back and forth. Lu Yi sat cross-legged, his thoughts gradually becoming clear. Originally, he also thought that with Abdullah's help, it would not be difficult to solve the problem of Final Realm, but now it seemed that he had underestimated the matter. Therefore, he still had to study a way to kill a heavenly god disciple. As long as he could figure out this method, not to mention the crisis of Final Realm, even the crisis of the entire galaxy could be easily solved. At that time, the Azura seal he could obtain would undoubtedly be much larger than solving the crisis of Final Realm alone. Thinking of this, he took out the jade slips that Aki Duo had sent before, and checked them one by one. These were all the various research on heavenly god disciples in this realm, studying how to quickly kill them. Several jade slips were quickly read. It had to be said that in the direction of heavenly god disciples, the cultivators of this realm had made many different attempts, but without exception, they all failed. It seemed that the only way to kill a heavenly god disciple was to kill them a certain number of times. He looked up at the irritated Abdullah. "Brother Luo, sit down first, I have something to ask you." Hearing this, Abdullah came over and sat down. "You've killed a lot of heavenly god disciples. Did you find anything?" Lu Yi asked. Before the two met, Abdullah was the left front general of the battlefield. The number of heavenly god disciples who died at his hands should not be small. Abdullah thought for a moment and said, "It's very difficult to kill, but you can kill them a few times. And depending on the cultivation base, the number of times a heavenly god disciple can be resurrected is different. The lower the cultivation base, the fewer times they can be resurrected." Lu Yi already knew about this information. He had seen it in those jade slips. Also, you have to kill a heavenly god disciple after they are completely resurrected and full of vitality to reduce the number of times they can be resurrected, Abdullah added. If you kill them before they are full of vitality, it's useless no matter how many times you kill them. There was a process to the resurrection of a heavenly god disciple. First, the broken body quickly became complete, and then the vitality suddenly burst out. If you only kill a heavenly god disciple when the body is complete, it will not reduce the number of times they can be resurrected at all. Lu Yi fell into deep thought. Generally speaking, the recovery of a cultivator's injuries consumed the power of qi and blood, and their own vitality. How could a heavenly god disciple have so much vitality to consume? This matter was very strange. If you want to explore it, you have to try it yourself. "Brother Luo, help me catch a few heavenly god disciples," Lu Yi said. "Tianheng won't let us go out." "Don't worry." Lu Yi gave him a comforting look. "Tianheng just won't let me go out. You should be able to go by yourself. Catching a few heavenly god disciples will be a piece of cake for you." Chapter 1923. In the end, Abdullah could not resist Lu Ye's persuasion and left alone, preparing to capture a few disciples of the enlightened master for him to study. While waiting, Lu Yi received a message from Sun Yingyue that another group of injured cultivators had retreated from the alien battlefield. Many of them were injured by the disciples of the enlightened master and needed his help. Lu Yi immediately rushed to Rinyuan Valley. Just like before, he activated the power of the talent tree and easily solved the problem. Many cultivators were grateful to him. When he returned to Xinglu, Abdullah had already returned. He gritted his teeth and looked at Lu Yi. "I will never believe your nonsense again." "What happened?" Lu Yi was stunned. "Tianhong scolded me severely. The battle merits I worked so hard to earn were reduced by 50%. Lu Yi looked sympathetic. "Didn't you tell him that I asked you to go out?" "I told him, but it was useless." Abdullah was infuriated. He had never been treated like this in a training exercise before. In the past, he had always been the cornerstone of the team. Even if there was sunshine in the training grounds, he would always be the one that sunshine could rely on. But this time he met Lu Yi. Compared to Lu Ye's importance, he was like a pawn that could be abandoned at will. Lu Yi was the most precious one. Then again, before Tianhong asked him to come back to protect Lu Yi, Tianhong was really good to him. Every time he returned from a battle, Tianhong would reward him greatly, saying that there would be people in the netherworld realm in the future. But compared to before, the treatment now was like heaven and earth. "What about the disciples of the enlightened master?" Lu Yi asked. Abdullah said angrily. "Tianhong said he would send someone to send them over." "That's good." Lu Yi nodded. After a while, there were indeed cultivators who sent back a few captured disciples of the enlightened master. Lu Yi began to study them without stopping. In the next few days, he first reproduced the direction that the cultivators of the netherworld realm had studied one by one, such as cutting the disciples of the enlightened master into pieces and burning them with fire. It was not that he did not believe in the cultivators of the netherworld realm, but some things were not comprehensive enough unless he tried it himself. From time to time, he would be called over by Sun Ninyue to help treat her injuries. In the past, what the cultivators feared the most was the corrosion of the magic power of a heavenly deity disciple. But now, with Lu Yi overseeing the rear, the cultivators no longer had any misgivings. On the battlefield, they were much more ferocious in killing their enemies. For a time, the morale of the netherworld cultivators soared. On the other hand, Lu Ye's research had not made any progress. He had changed several batches of heavenly god disciples, ranging from Xing Su to Yu Yao, but he had not made any substantial discoveries. On this day, Lu Yi was helping people heal in the Renyuan Valley, and Abdo was guarding beside him out of boredom. A figure suddenly walked over. "Senior brother." Lu Yi looked up and nodded slightly. "Junior sister Duo. Thank you for your hard work, senior brother." Akido smiled. "It's my duty." He had been here for several days, but other than healing people, he did not have much contact with outsiders. Only Akijua would come to talk to him from time to time. It could be seen that this junior sister seemed to worship him. But this time, Lu Yi found that Akido's expression was a little unnatural, as if she was a little nervous. "Junior sister, what's the matter?" Lu Yi asked while urging the power of the talent tree to heal people. "No." Akido shook her head. Lu Yi glanced at her doubtfully, but then again, he did not know for the time being whether Akido was a shadow or a cultivator who participated in the experience. Based on his judgment, Akido was not old, but now she had the cultivation of Yu Yao, which showed that her talent was outstanding. Just as he was pondering, a commotion suddenly came from not far away. Surging magic power suddenly burst out, and screams suddenly sounded. Abdo, who had been guarding beside Lu Yi, was bored. His eyes lit up, and he rushed over with his fists raised. "I knew you would come." In the past few days, Abdo had also mentioned to Lu Yi that now that his reputation was gradually spreading, the heavenly god disciples would definitely notice his existence and target him. In the netherworld, there were also many heavenly god disciples who had infiltrated in secretly, such as the two that Lu Yi first encountered. So Lu Yi was likely to be attacked by the heavenly god disciples. Now the prophecy came true, and the heavenly god disciples really came. Although the Yunluo Holy Land's defense was tight, the heavenly god disciples were no different from ordinary cultivators when they did not act. Now the Yunluo Holy Land had gathered cultivators from all over the domain, so it was difficult to screen. Normally, the heavenly god disciples would not take such risks, but Lu Ye's special ability was enough to make them risk their lives. Abdo rushed out excitedly, without the slightest awareness of being a guard. "Senior brother, come with me." Just as Lu Yi was looking in that direction, an anxious voice sounded by his ear. Immediately after, a warm and soft hand grabbed him. Turning his head, he found that it was a kiddo who was nervously dragging him. "No need." Lu Yi smiled gently, but as soon as his voice fell, his eyes narrowed, because at this moment, a powerful aura that belonged to Rizhao suddenly spread out. Lu Yi's eyes were instantly fixed on a middle-aged cultivator, who was rushing over there. At this moment, the middle-aged cultivator was surrounded by many heavenly god disciples, and the scene was chaotic. When Lu Yi looked at him, the other party happened to look at Lu Yi. When their eyes met, Lu Yi's heart skipped a beat. Abdo was rushing toward the middle-aged cultivator, and the excitement and joy on his face suddenly turned stiff when he realized that the other party was Rizhao. "Found him." The middle-aged cultivator's eyes flashed with a trace of fierceness, and he fiercely slapped at Abdo. The powerful barbarian from the ancient barbarian world suddenly flew away like a kite with a broken string. Lu Yi didn't even look back as he followed Aikido and flew forward. This way. Aikido still grabbed his hand and led him to fly in a direction. However, after only 3 breaths, Lu Yi suddenly stopped. "It's too late, you have to go." Rizhao had his eyes on him. How could he let him escape? Fortunately, he was not completely powerless. He still had 2 red talismans on him. One was for escaping, and the other was a talisman of killing. The talisman of killing was given to him by Su Yuqing for self-defense when he decided to come to the Azura arena. When he felt that something was wrong, he had secretly activated the power of the red talisman. Tianhong was just outside the realm, so he didn't need to do too much. He just needed to hold on for a little while, and Tianhong would come back. At this moment, Lu Yi deeply felt the danger of the Shirabe experience. It didn't mean that one could sit back and relax just because they were strong enough. Since ancient times, so many evildoers had gathered in the Shiraba. There was always a higher mountain than the one before, unless one's strength could stand at the top of the long river of history. Moreover, Yu Yao was not the leader of this experience. At this moment, a figure flashed in front of him. It was a kiddo, who had been holding his hand and escaping, suddenly blocked his way. Lu Yi was startled, and immediately raised his hand to grab her shoulder, wanting to throw her away. But before he could do anything, a kiddo shouted, "Open!" As soon as she finished speaking, a jade hairpin in her hair suddenly broke, and dots of fluorescent light quickly expanded in all directions. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a barrier, enveloping her and Lu Yi. The middle-aged cultivator had already closed in, and the magic power around him surged like a black fog, showing his identity as a divine disciple. He looked cold and fierce, and a mysterious power surged from his palm. There was a loud bang. Lu Yi almost lost his footing, but what surprised him was that Aikido's protective barrier didn't break. Although a crack appeared on the barrier after this attack, it still managed to hold on. That jade hairpin treasure was definitely of high quality. Otherwise, it would not have been able to block Rizhao's attack. It should be known that even Yu Yao, who was as strong as Abdullah, was sent flying by Rizhao's palm. At this moment, Aikido's petite figure stood in front of Lu Yi, without the restriction of the jade hairpin. Her black hair fluttered, and her magic power surged around her. "You overestimate yourself." Rizhao's divine disciple was furious that his attack did not succeed. His magic power surged even more fiercely, and he slammed his palm again. Crack! The barrier broke even more, but in the end it still held. "Senior brother, hurry up and run later. I'll stop him." Aikido clenched her teeth, struggling to hold on. Lu Yi did not have the habit of letting others protect him. Moreover, if the barrier broke, he and Aikido would not be able to leave. Magic power surged, and the power of the red talisman could be released at any time. Lu Yi only needed to wait for the opponent's next attack to give him a surprise. The third attack came quickly. With a crash, the barrier broke, and Aikido spat out blood. Her figure flew out, and her whole body went limp. Lu Yi raised his hand and pressed on the hilt of the Pan Mountain saber. Just as he was about to fully activate the power of the red talisman, he suddenly heard an angry shout. "You're courting death." It was the voice of the heavenly rainbow. As the voice sounded, the heavenly rainbow fell from the sky like a ray of light. It grabbed the Rijal's divine disciple's neck, jumped into the air, and directly took him out of the boundary. The next moment, the aftermath of a violent confrontation came from the sky. It was obvious that the two Rijals were fighting. Lu Yi turned his head and looked into the distance. His body swayed, and in a few steps he came to Akito's side. At this moment, the girl had fallen into a coma. Blood flowed out of her 7 orifices, and her vitality was extremely weak. Her body was surrounded by the magic power of a divine disciple. Her situation was obviously not good. Lu Yi quickly raised his hand and grabbed her wrist. He activated the power of the talent tree. He carefully controlled the power of the talent tree to help her dissolve the corrosion of the divine disciple's magic power. Then he took out a large healing pill and stuffed it into her mouth. He gently patted her to help her swallow it. Then he carried her by the waist and spread out his divine sense to search for Sun Yunhua. In terms of medical attainments, Sun Yunhua was undoubtedly the strongest in this world. Only by finding her could he save Akito. After a breath, Lu Yi rushed in a direction and quickly came to the side of Sun Yunhua, who was covered in dust. She was not affected too much. The main reason was that the female sword cultivator, who had been following her, had done her job and blocked the impact of the aftermath for her. "Senior sister, save her," Lu Yi said anxiously. Sun Yunhua shook her head and saw Akito in Lu Ye's arms. She quickly came back to her senses. End of chapter. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.